Why don't we just state our names?
Linda Sarcy.
That's why Thad Kubershak, alderperson.
Tom Realm, alderperson, 4th District.
Jake Cattenall, alderperson.
Secretary McMayor.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Paul Waller, Public Works Superintendent.
Joe Eichstead, City Engineer.
Matt Heidemann, Parks and Buildings.
Shane Blazer, Alderman.
Joe Zerflu, alderperson. Item number 2, review and discuss 2019 departmental budget request with the focus on reviewing the Department of Public Works budgets. We'll start with the Parks Department first. I guess we can do this kind of orderly. We'll let the department head go over whatever he or she feels like they want to or need to in their budget, and then we'll have any questions or concerns addressed by the city council members present. Mr. Heidemann?
Well, basically our budget is fairly flat. If you looked at the 3-year averages of 15, 16, 17, 18 is kind of an anomaly. That was a little higher, but we're just, if you take into account the increases for roll-ups and, you know, some minor rental rate increases, it's pretty much status quo on our budget for this year. There's money that's been shifted, you know, into different areas, areas that have typically in the last few years we've been a little short or close to, you know, level. I've added a little more Whitterfield. That was raised a little bit, the zoo, because the zoo, for instance, we've pretty much had a fairly steady increase of visitation there, and it's requiring a little more maintenance, and so we threw a little more money in that. Took a little bit of money out of, I'd say the most substantial amount of money we took out of just the regular general parks budget, and that's due to a couple factors. One of them is our winter maintenance. In the past, we were doing a lot of bench table repairs, and that's slowly going away as we go to maintenance-free tables, maintenance-free benches. I've cut the hours back on that type of winter maintenance substantially. You know, at one time, I think, don't quote me on this, but I want to say we were somewhere in between 200 and 300 hours. And I think this year that's down to like 100. So that's been cut back. And as time goes on and we keep going with more maintenance-free designs on some of these park amenities, you won't have the painting, you don't have the wood replacement, and so the money is just basically being reallocated in other departments where there is a need.
Sure.
So other than that, like I said, I don't have any real earth-shattering for you. It's pretty close to status quo.
Yeah, I'll add a few comments. You know, as we, and the shifting that Matt's talking about is just essentially internally trying to adjust priorities to meet the needs of the city.
Yeah.
A few of the areas where we remain challenged, some of our building maintenance activities, some of the features of the buildings, HVAC, roofs, things like that here at City Hall. The plumbing's old, the electrical's old. We're seeing some additional maintenance needs there. So we do have to keep an eye on that and look at potentially shifting priorities in the future there. Grounds, we've got some new things with the splash pad. Demitz Park, we've got some plantings that are going to require some spring and fall maintenance that we need to be cognizant of and make sure that we're adjusting our priorities to manage those. And to do some of that, we've established some initiatives right now to try to provide a little more value. For instance, we're fairly limited to what we can do for our tree planting program. And so this fall we've initiated a partnership program with residents. We've identified areas, particularly adjacent to some of our more recent construction projects where there's opportunities to plant some boulevard trees. We're really limited to about 25 trees a year because we don't have the staff to water them. And so we've sent letters out to the residents where we're interested in planting trees to see if they'll partner with the city and if they will take care of the watering for the first at least year, and 2 depending on the you know, how wet the season is and how the tree's doing, then we'll agree to plant that tree at their property, provide the bag, stake it. They just have to water it. And I think that'll result in us getting a lot more of that work done. The other thing that's looming, it's here now, but I don't think we've seen the dramatic effects yet, is the emerald ash borer and the number of trees that we're going to lose because of that. We have recently evaluated, and it not only benefits the parks activities, but just mowing activities in general along our roadways and parks. We've evaluated, and typically there's been, one group that has a standard route in the parks, and another group has, generally with some of the public works staff, has another route along our roads, highways, and medians. And what we've done this year is really take a close look at trying to make that program more efficient. We've done some different things with purchasing smaller zero-turn mowers that we can get more summer help staff on, and that's resulted in some efficiencies as well. We have removed some areas from routine mowing. I'm not sure if you've received some complaints, but I've heard some comments about the expressway, along the expressway. We're going to do a few things. Towards the end of the season, we did a few things to kind of straighten that up a little bit, but in areas where we really need to do a nice job of mowing, and we were getting to the point where we had a lot of complaints because the frequency we were getting in there was too far apart, and we were getting a lot of clumping. It just didn't look professional. It just wasn't to our standards. And so really the only way to address that was take a look at some of these areas where we felt we could get away from mowing altogether and try to get these other areas done a little more frequently. So we continue to look for efficiencies in those areas, and because we do know that we do have new features and new things that we have to take care of, and those priorities do change over time. So I think that covers really some of the highlights for parks. But if you have any specific questions.
I did notice, like across from the hospital, that hill
Yes.
wasn't mowed. I didn't get any complaints on it, but I definitely noticed it. I'm like, I wonder.
Well, and early on, when we were mowing, we were still kind of going around the trees, and it looked a little strange. And so what we've done is we straighten that out so that we still have a nice groomed area next to the roadway, and then we'll let it grow more natural, up the bank. And I think over time that'll be fine. We may want to take a look at doing some planting in those areas, a little more wildflower, butterfly habitat type thing. But those are the types of activities that we're that we're trying to plan and look forward to, so that we can maintain the level of service where we expect to, and adjust our priorities so that we can still do that with the staff that we have.
There was a community group working on a prairie conversion in that area, which would kind of foster some habitat.
Yes.
I think it's a departure from the manicured look, though, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to take a couple years to get it established. The only comment I would make related to parks was on page 69 of the actual page. I don't know what it is in your PDF, but in the aquatics budget, you'll see $20,000 for waterworks and lighting, and that is the splash pad now operating costs now being reflected in the budget. It was our first full summer with that open, and so we've got some experience of what that's going to cost to both water and electricity for that budget.
Yeah, I believe the total operating budget for the splash pad is gonna be somewhere around the 30,000 mark I think and it looks like that's gonna be pretty close.
So is that mainly water costs?
A lot of it's utilities, yeah.
Is that kind of what we expected there, or?
To some extent, and I'm working with the utility to see the one thing that I didn't necessarily expect, and maybe I should have, was the fire protection fee associated. It's associated by meter size, but the idea is it's supposed to represent the fire protection cost for the building. So a house generally has a 3/4 inch meter or a 5/8 meter, and your fire protection fee is appropriate for your house. A 3-inch meter is, I think, $700 a month.
Yeah, and actually there's 2 meters there, the one 5/8 meter and
Right.
or 3/4 meter and the one 3-inch meter.
So there's a pretty big price tag associated here for fire protection that we're looking to see if there are some exceptions through the PSC, and because it doesn't represent the fire protection needs, and that's what that formula is supposed to represent. So, but until we're successful with that, we have to budget for what we expect, and that's it. Otherwise, our water use is right where we expected it to be. We are limited because it's a pass-through design. We're limited to how much water we're legally allowed to flow through it, and we're underneath that limit. So we're doing well.
Has there been any repairs that have been needed to the splash pad? I noticed when we went there, there was part of it wasn't working. Was that in the costs, or is that we're gonna be on next year? Or?
This last year there was some issues, but most of those were covered under warranty yet.
Okay.
I don't think we actually had any out of pocket for feature. Going forward in the future, there are some wearable parts that will be changed probably on an annual basis. Typically, the diaphragms, from what I've seen so far, receive a lot of wear, but. The other items that you're talking about, as far as the non-functioning pieces of equipment, I believe all that was warranty.
Yeah, it was just that river race on
Yeah.
the end, and then that was out for about a month, maybe,
Yeah.
just about. So
Overall, very popular. I think we had some overcrowding issues just based upon the scale and size of it. We've been working with the city of Stevens Point and the village of Plover, who are planning these facilities because their residents were visiting ours and now wanted to put them in their own municipalities. So we've been doing a bit of sharing of our experience and the costs and that sort of thing. But so hopefully when their facilities come online, ours will become less crowded.
One in Rome now too.
Right.
Is there something with one that needs to be repaired, or a slope, or concrete, or?
That was addressed and
all that's been addressed and taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the design of a splash pad, you want to have a dry zone around the outside perimeter for parents to sit or people to walk or whatever. And for whatever reason, when that was there was some change in the design, and somehow something got missed, and it didn't do that. And so on the contractor's dime, actually it was on the designer's dime. WaterTech paid for the repair. Trench drain essentially was put in, and the sidewalk was taken out and replaced. And so we did that. We also, through use, came to the discovery that some of the landscaping, we had some stones and things, and we had to get rid of that because the kids would take and throw those out. And so we had to change that.
Rocks and splash pads don't mix.
But really nothing unanticipated.
And how about the filtration collection things? Has that been abandoned? Are we using it? Or
It's
nobody
online.
using
It's online.
Yeah.
We can expand its use if we have other needs for water. But it is online. It's being used then. That used water is being used as underground irrigation for all of the plantings around the site. So we're using it as planned.
Any other questions from
Mr. Chairman, real quick. Matt, earlier you kind of talked about kind of different allocations at whether it's Whitterfield or at Zoo, and I had an opportunity to actually be on the project of the lift station that we're conducting right next to the zoo. So I was in and out tying rebar there, but I saw the amount of people that came down to Helen's house and the zoo, and it was actually kind of rewarding to feel that, because that was a very heavily utilized area for community residents. But whereas having a positive to that, so I would, if funds need to be reallocated for that, to have a better experience. Whereas the Whitterfield, that is one thing that I've got kind of a question, especially having, an organization there that we as public can't access that particular field on an open basis, kind of like a zoo would be, only in terms of when games are played. And then if it's a case where, and I'm not involved in any baseball organizations or anything like that, but if our school kids get into a playoff situation, they're not able to get onto that because of contractual deals. I have a real problem allocating funds for this particular city-owned park if we're getting excluded from that. So
I want to clarify. I know they've taken on some additional mowing responsibilities. I want to clarify what they're currently doing. Is it different than what it had been in the past?
As it sits right now, with the school district no longer using East Junior High, part of that increased expense is we're going to be mowing the section that school district used to mow, which basically amounts to all that field on the outer perimeter, all the way around to the fence on Lincoln Street. They agreed to still mow. There's a small section in the parking lot that actually is city land, but they agreed to keep mowing that, but we're going to take over the rest of that exterior mowing at this point. So you're talking a good sized chunk of land there.
the maintenance of the diamond though.
Well, the diamond though, as far as the inside of the fence,
Right.
they're mowing that. In the past, we were mowing that, and they bought a small mower, so they took over that expense. But a large part of Whitterfield also is utility costs. And I think that's something that when we go forward, I believe the lease with the Raptors is up shortly, a year.
Gonna
They
ask
want
that
to
question.
renegotiate it already.
And there has
They
to be a
haven't sent us anything.
renegotiation. You know, back when that was originally done, I don't think anybody at that time had any idea how successful they were gonna be or where this thing was gonna go.
Correct, you got
And,
it.
right, and now here we are, we've got a track record, and I think that can be taken into account when we renegotiate with them on some of these items such as utility costs.
I was gonna say,
And on
correct, so-
utilities, potentially, one of the discussion items was potentially capping it, that it'd be up to a certain amount. Right now, in many cases, the city's paying all of it, and we've seen some waste. You know, when nobody's there, air conditioning's on in certain areas, when nobody's
Lights.
there, the chillers are still on, lights, a number of things that I think if the, you know, if the organization were paying that out of pocket, they wouldn't be practicing that way.
Oh, exactly right.
Well, that's a little my concern is it's still a private business, you know,
Yep.
ultimately it's providing a entertainment or it's not, maybe a service, I guess, to the community, but it's still ultimately a profit generating business, and how much are the taxpayers supplementing that business with?
Well, I don't
That's my
think,
concern.
yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that they're supplementing it as
Right.
well. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something when it comes time for renegotiation, we're gonna take all that.
And the other issue that Paul and I have both heard from time to time is the fulfillment of the contract with some of the other entities using the
That's
field.
my concern too.
Yeah, I think that time we expected a lease renegotiation this last spring. They were gonna send us a draft proposal. We never received anything, so I would expect that their lease is coming due very soon, but it's coming, and I know they wanna extend it, right? And I think, all these things should be on the table, as I mentioned. They do pay, I think their current, lease rate is about 15,000, 14,000 a year.
It'll be 20,000
It's
this
up
year.
to 20 now already? Yeah, so.
And when's the lease end? What year?
I think it goes through 2020, I do believe.
It's 19 or
That's all right.
20, yes.
Yeah, but there's $20,000 a year in payments.
Yeah, I just have concerns about our youth in our community and the use of the field
Yeah, I mean, if
for
they're,
events.
if they're willing to open up their books and show that they're not profiting anything, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, that's a negotiation there, so. but
Unfortunately, they operate on 5 other municipal fields, so we've got
Right,
some
we have
good
comparisons,
alternatives
yeah.
to look at
Yeah.
now. I mean,
I
they're
was
building a
hoping
new
we'd-
stadium over in Schwabenland. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not an inexpensive deal they're doing there, so.
That's great for the
Good
community,
opportunities to
but
look at it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so virtually at Whitterfield though, we're supplying the toiletries and cleaning the bathrooms during the week.
Mhm.
And then it's mowing the grass of the outlying areas from Lincoln Street to A Street, Chestnut to Appleton.
Yeah.
Nothing really on the fields. I mean, we help them out in the spring and the fall, putting up the net, you know, just because we made an investment in that and don't want to leave it hanging so that it gets rotten because of the weather and stuff like that. So I think they actually said to leave it, and we suggested that we take it down on an annual basis.
Yeah, you're cost-wise, you're probably better off taking it down.
It's the sun's.
The sun and the snow, the weight of the snow on it, but every year, they to this point anyways, with the old general managers, in September, October, they would come to us with their wish list of things that they wanted improved in the stadium, and then that was kind of a little bit of a negotiation as in to where we would end up, and that's something we can take into consideration too.
And they just had a change in general manager. That
Correct.
So.
Wonderful, thank you, that's all I have.
I'd only had one other thing related to the parks budget, and that's the outlay. You don't see an outlay budget in the operating budget, and I think the Park and Rec Commission is gonna continue to discuss what that 2019 outlay and the priorities are gonna be, but generally you see that in the other budgets, but there isn't an outlay attached here.
No, and we have a tentative outlay that, like you said, will be presented at the next Park and Rec. We've added some items and shuffled some items around. You know, if you would like beforehand, I'm sure we can get copies out.
Then the other item would be the zoo, and that's obviously a Park and Rec Commission item, but the
As far as the,
Teskey Memorial, the
yeah, the
3,000.
phasing of the improvements.
Yeah, right.
What about staffing? What's going on with staffing? Yeah.
We have one position,
Yeah,
that was,
retirement.
yes, we have a retirement coming up. A long-term employee, is retiring and that position is currently listed. If we fill that position, he will continue to mentor a couple of our newer employees and then also take over some of the duties from, our former custodial person, which has been gone since July.
So right now, some of the custodial services we're farming out.
So are we, I guess, replacing two with one? Is that what it is?
No, it's 2 for 2.
Yeah.
So what happened is that we had a vacancy this spring and we interviewed for that position.
Is that the retirement of the city hall custodian? Or?
No, at the garage.
One of the
At the
parks.
garage or park?
At the parks.
Okay.
Same
Okay.
thing, sorry.
So I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had a retirement, we advertised and interviewed, we interviewed 5 people. And we made a offer and we hired that person. Through that interview process, we found another individual that met the qualifications, was very good. And we did some shuffling with staff so that we could use that person that's been an employee for 30 plus years to possibly mentor both of those individuals. So then, like you said, we had a retirement here at City Hall and doing the custodial piece and building maintenance piece. And we asked the person that's going to be retiring this spring if he'd be willing to do that position, because he was the relief position for that.
Okay.
And so, because then, we wouldn't have to go through the interview or the advertising and the interview process again in the spring. And we made that offer and that was turned down, and so we didn't have any other qualified candidates in our mind. So we're now advertising it again, and that's gonna be up here the first part of November.
So did we ever hire for the custodian then?
No, because we have a full-time person in that position right now.
Custodian position?
Yeah.
So the custodial position right now, the person that's in there, we're using them for more of the building maintenance activities and still the parks activities. So we're one position short, and we've evaluated how do you best use that person for more of the high level work, and then we're currently farming out the custodial services until we get that position filled. But we're using this time also to evaluate the needs for and the types of skills that we're looking for in that building maintenance position. And we've got a few more months to perform that evaluation. Again, it's really about jockeying around the priorities to make sure that we're not getting behind in certain areas. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, currently we're one position short.
And that's for the upcoming retirement, basically?
No, through the retirement that we've already had this virtually in July.
Because you exhausted your candidate pool.
Right.
And it's been posted out there for.
And so we'll need, so we're short one, and then we'll
Be having another short.
okay, then we'll have another, okay.
So we currently have one vacancy,
and
and then we'll have a second vacancy in the spring.
I like the idea, at least the forethought, to have them work with that person, so a little
Yeah,
training.
and it was supposed to happen back in September, and unfortunately the person turned the position down.
Okay.
So it would have been seamless, but it didn't work that way.
Well, I guess so we asked it to police and fire, and I'll ask you the same thing, is do you have anything that you feel that you need for your department that we need to address, or equipment, or
I think equipment wise, Paul and I try to work together and we try to get our equipment on a 5-year plan. Parks typically doesn't do a separate individual equipment purchase.
Right, you do it all.
It comes from the pool through DPW, and Paul has put together a schedule, a replacement schedule, and I think it's pretty well addressed as far as our equipment replacement. This last year we replaced a 2008 mower with a new 16-foot mower, and then we bought the 2 smaller mowers. I think coming up, one of the next things that we'll be looking at is to replace an old two-wheel drive tractor. Will be either a mini end loader or something along those lines. And I believe we have 2 1-tons, probably within the next couple of years.
So you don't have anything pressing right now, or?
I would say not pressing. You know, it's coming to its replacement schedule time, but.
And you're on that replacement schedule?
Yeah, we're on that replacement schedule.
Perfect.
Yeah, so virtually what Matt had just said, we have, he's got a 1996 two-wheel drive tractor that was supposed to be replaced in 2017. We solicited pricing on that or whatever, and it was a little more money than what we were thinking that it was going to be, and currently we put about 110 hours a year on that tractor. And so we sat down, we did some research on looking for used stuff that was, 4 or 5 years old or whatever. There just wasn't anything out there, so we're still exploring that. And then also, like he had said, they had 2 1-ton trucks that were supposed to be replaced in 2018, and we didn't end up doing that because we have the garbage trucks coming through. So
I was gonna say, because there's a big chunk of that money that was skipped. Okay, I just don't want to see us. The garbage trucks cause us to have all kinds of other problems with equipment down the road because we're unable to.
Yeah,
address
it's
those.
not necessarily. I mean, the garbage trucks were.
They're
The garbage
necessary,
trucks
but
were, they were budgeted and
necessary,
replaced. I mean,
but-
it's some things that happened in the past or whatever. We had a snow blower that we weren't planning on replacing. That was a $200,000 item, and.
Was that big one that attaches?
Yeah, onto the loader. Also, we ended up paying for the recycling carts, which that money's coming back in through the rental rate, but it's gonna take us 7 more years to recoup that cost or whatever, so.
Okay.
As equipment costs go up, not just for parks, but for everything, we're really trying to evaluate, how can we increase the longevity of some of these pieces? And that's been a real focus for us. With Paul's worked on and has been successful, and some of you already know this that have been through Public Works, but evaluating some of the equipment and trying to project the failure of it. And for instance, we've got 2 1-tons that are the same year. One's getting a lot of miles on it, one doesn't get very many. Midway through the life, we're actually changing the equipment on the trucks so that we can plan the obsolescence accordingly. We don't have a truck that's all rusted out with just a few miles on it, and one that's still in decent shape with a ton of miles on it. And so we're really looking at trying to extend the life of those pieces of equipment. And we currently have a master plan underway evaluating the city garage and the climate control and ventilation requirements to make the equipment last longer. When we're doing snow and ice control activities, it's hard on the trucks, it's hard on the graders, it's hard on the loaders, hard on the sidewalk tractors, and it's just some of it's just the environment that it's stored in, right? So we're evaluating that, really trying to plan and maximize the life of this equipment. There's a lot of pieces of equipment that we'd like to have, but at the same time, there's other departments and other priorities. So we're really trying to look at it at a global level. There's times where we will rent equipment because it's just hard to justify owning it and maintaining it. So it is something that equipment is really important to us as far as us being able to get our jobs done efficiently. So it is something that we take very seriously.
So with phase 1 now almost done, so is there a lot more maintenance or mowing, or is there?
It'll be different.
I was gonna say, is there, because
it's not just a big green space anymore,
right?
So how we mow, we're gonna have to evaluate it a bit. Same thing with the landscaping, maintenance activities, snow and ice control activities. And
that's my concern, is because you're gonna have a higher use than Demis Park, and obviously before you just kept it mowed, and that was probably a lot easier. But now with the higher use, I think you have to, since there's been a significant investment in that, we need to invest to keep it looking nice and.
Right, and again, on
That's
a
good.
priority basis, we'll be giving that consideration, especially over the winter as we perform some of these winter activities. And I anticipate that we will be revising, once we really have a clear vision and, you know, of what we need to do to keep things clean and, you know, remove the snow and mow it, that we'll end up establishing a new snow and ice control policy so that there are expectations, right? I mean, if we don't have enough time with the staff that we have, we may have to delay some of those snow and ice control activities for some of these other lower use areas for a day or two, you know, where we can still get it done. It's just understanding the expectation, or maybe there's certain areas that, trail areas that won't be free and clear of all snow and ice. Sidewalk areas, yes, trail areas, maybe not. So we're gonna evaluate that and come back with a proposal to revise our snow and ice control plan. And again, it's really about making sure that we're meeting expectations. And if we have priorities that are higher, we have to look then at other areas and what can we do to modify. Maybe it's staff, maybe it's equipment, maybe it's dollars, and maybe it's just changing how we do things a bit to make sure that we're getting those high priority projects done. And what else can we compromise on that might be a lower priority?
Yeah, I agree. There's significant investment made.
Right, we intend to take care of it.
Yeah, otherwise, what was the point?
There'll definitely be a change in maintenance practices down there, types of equipment, even, you know, maybe hours people. It's,
Okay.
Yeah, you probably have a 700% increase in landscaping products down there in Devitt's Park than you do in the entire city, so, but you can't see what it is because it's not done, you know, so. I mean, there could easily be, you know, a month and a half's worth of work there, you know, on an annual basis, both the spring and the fall, that isn't there right now, so.
Yeah, and we need to maintain it, so. Otherwise, there was no point in doing it.
Right.
But I guess that's a wait and see at this point, what that will be.
So we satisfied with parks at this point?
Parksley, just, you know, a couple generic questions, and I apologize, maybe you already answered them. But just to comment a little bit on the Devitt's Park, what do we plan on doing if the soil erodes from underneath the sidewalks? With the fact that it's flooded, and it flooded already, and the construction still hasn't been done, what do we have to have the foresight to say what are we gonna do and how much money we're gonna stick into a sidewalk next to a river that floods? Or do we is there a plan to move that sidewalk up?
No,
I'd say
it's
that the west from the bank,
Yeah,
the west from the bank has flooded for the last 20 years.
once
and
the
I know-
vegetation takes, it shouldn't be an issue.
I think Joe can address some of the normal water line, you know, the elevations that went into the engineering of and design of the project.
So, yeah, I wouldn't suspect that the sidewalk will disappear unless the riprap goes with it, and that would have to be a pretty monster storm, worse than what we've seen. The riprap size for the waterway that's there and the conditions that are there, that's going to protect the bank as long as the soil stays behind the riprap. The riprap stays on top of the soil. There's a lot of modeling that went into determining river elevations and thought going into, you know, what things are appropriate next to the river, what things aren't, you know, during flooding conditions. Certainly there's going to be some messes left after flooding events. It's just the nature of the river, and I mean, we had messes before. It's just that the park's going to look different. It's going to have a different expectation for cleanliness and use. So.
No, like I said, it was more to address possibly some unforeseen, and if I did, and I apologize because I don't see it in the budget, you know, that incidentals for Devitt's Park, so that's why I was asking.
And I noticed there's significant change to the whole shape of everything, so I assume there's a point behind that for runoff or whatever. So I'm not the engineer, but that's another joke.
Yeah, so some of the
three.
design changes are just characteristics for the design of the park. Some were related to the flood levels, some weren't. So it all kind of depends on what the topic is, but.
The big test will be spring.
Yeah,
There's a fabric behind all of that riprap.
Oh, like a.
Right, so unless the riprap disappears, there's structure holding all of that soil in place.
and riprap
It's the big stones.
Okay.
Little rock.
Okay.
The new bank.
Thanks.
Yep.
The only other thing I wanted to comment on, well, probably not the only thing, but I don't know how many years ago, Mayor, and maybe Joe, you can speak to this. How many years ago did we stop putting budgeting money for fireworks?
2005,
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
and we do budget money for fireworks.
I didn't see it. That's what I
Yeah,
was
it's
asking.
in community benefit, I think.
Yeah,
Which would be page
I think it's under special events.
special events.
Special events, okay,
Yeah.
that's, I
Yeah.
just didn't see it, I didn't know if it came out of.
Yeah, I think we've been, about, our
97.
contribution to it's been 4,000
Page 92.
plus whatever labor we do, but, and then the rest has been fund, other communities and then fundraise, so.
And on that
Or
note,
grade in there.
this year was the first year the city took over. It wasn't by choice. It was an expectation that the city now manage the Team Fireworks Committee, and that came out of my office. And because Encourage decided they were no longer going to oversee that initiative, so it took about 6 weeks of pennies, collecting pennies, literally, from everybody in town. So I guess depending on how the budget shook out, we were likely going to backstop some of that additional contribution from room tax or levy if there was flexibility, because literally we're paying staff to fundraise for the city fireworks. And so I think one of the ideas we proposed was to do through equalized value. Fireworks cost hasn't changed over the last two contracts, so putting out like to the municipalities that do give us money, putting out a formula for them to contribute, so that way our contribution may go up a little bit, but it's probably a better use of time instead of paying staff to collect donations from the public.
What do we usually? I guess that's probably another budget. I'm just wondering what we
It's on
spend
90,
usually.
page
What do we usually
97.
spend on fireworks?
4,000,
4,000 is our
Well, not.
contribution.
I'm sorry. The overall fireworks.
18,000,
Okay.
17,500 or so.
Yeah, 17.
Well, it's a huge and great event for the community.
It is, yeah.
Yep.
And fortunately, businesses support it in a big way. And we'll share some
Yeah, we
documentation on that because we've got a breakdown of who gives what, the businesses that contribute in the municipalities. We have to just put a request basically together to the other municipalities that are going through their budget. I know for one, Grand Rapids doesn't generally utilize its available tax levy. We generally bump up against our levy limit. So I think there's ample opportunity to solicit the town for additional revenue for fireworks.
Yeah, and thank you, I apologize, because I seen the Christmas decorations and stuff, and I didn't see 4th of July, so I wanted to make sure that I understood, so I apologize for that.
Good question. I'm glad you brought it up, actually. I didn't address it previously.
I should move on to engineering.
Hang on just a second. I'm looking at the aquatics for meat. So is it,
What page are you on?
7.
70?
When did you receive the email with this large packet? I got a
October.
small one.
Hold on, I got it right here.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It took me a while. October 2nd.
Okay,
That's
thank
from
The mayor.
I was looking under Tim.
I was too.
I had one up and I just got it
Why can't I
earlier.
find it?
it just says, meat pool budgeted highlights 75,000 to aquatic line item is budgeted for operating costs of the planned splash pad and the operating cost of the new aquatic center. So I guess I'm curious, what's the new aquatic center? Is that the splash pad in particular, or are we?
So the history on that is when we closed Mead Pool, we consciously decided not to shift those dollars somewhere else in the budget to hold a placeholder there, knowing that we were gonna have, I think we discussed earlier, $30,000 for the splash pad operation. So Mead Pool previously cost 75 grand to operate a season, and so to maintain the budget for that future facility, we've maintained those dollars in the aquatics portion of the budget. Because frankly, if we were to wipe it to some other priority, not that we don't spend that or couldn't spend that somewhere else, from a budget flexibility standpoint, we've chosen to maintain that in there, and I don't know if Tim or...
Yeah, I mean, the premise behind that is just so that when we do have the new aquatics facility, that we're not starting from scratch trying to fit in the operational support for that into the budget, so we're kind of maintaining that in the budget. That doesn't mean that we can't use that 45,000, you know, for another one-time type use, you know, because obviously for 2019, we're not going to spend it on a new facility because it won't be open by then. So we're just maintaining, but that can be used for another one-time use and things like that. So it's just basically a placeholder.
What that is, Lee, I think is that when we do these, we get last year's budget. So I think that note on the bottom is actually from last year's note, and it just wasn't updated to be what this year's budget is. Because
no, you know what and that's where, you know, we were talking about before, is trying to make sure that we're at the tax levy and the limits, and I wanted to make sure that we weren't stashing money away that we're not seeing, unless maybe if that went into an aquatics maintenance fund.
Yeah, that's, you know.
You know, if we created an account for it, I'm okay with it. If we're hiding money and creating situations where we're budgeting for money, but yet we don't as aldermen get to see where that money goes.
Right.
Then I'm gonna have an issue with it, so that's why I'm asking, and like I said, if there's an account made for that.
Right.
But I do understand that if you get it into an account, that it would be tough to utilize that money elsewhere as needed, but I just don't wanna have all these, budgeted things, you know, we're maxing ourselves out every year, and then we're gonna say, oh, by the way, we have money here, well.
Right.
There's no actual for this year, so was there, the money just carried over from 17 to?
It would sit in reserves unless we allocate it in the transfer resolution in the spring. Unless we.
If you remember in prior budgets, we had the Y camp that we utilized that money for, the summer camp that the city decided to fund.
Oh, that's right.
So
yeah.
So we used that aquatics, that operating money to fund that in those previous years.
So that's that 10,990 in the actual in 2017 came from that 75?
Right.
And then the other 65 was carried over and added to this year's budget? Okay.
But that's what it is, though. It's actually just a note that was left over from last year, because if you look up above that note, you know, you look at 2018 budget is 75,000, and the aquatics actual budget for 2019 is 45,000. So it's just a note that was left in there by error by us from last year. So
No, like I said, I questioned that.
Yep.
You know, whether it's equipment replacement or, you know, if that money could be allocated, I wanna make sure that we're allocating that money to where it needs to go, but I do understand the idea of holding money, you know, budgeting, so we don't have to try to like squeeze it into the budget in the future. Like, I get both sides, I just wanna make sure that we're not creating a bunch of these all over the place and not utilizing the funds when we're not fixing streets. You know what I'm saying? And I just wanna make sure I'm clear. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Eideman.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
you take that, man.
So, Mr. Eichstadt, if you wanna, at the beginning of the meeting, I just said just to maintain some semblance of order, we'll have the department head go over his budget, anything he wants to highlight, and then we'll, after he's done, then we'll ask questions or whatever, so.
Thank you, and I apologize.
No.
for being late.
No, man, not a problem at all.
Page 33, I believe, is the engineering budget. The engineering section is kind of broken up into two primary categories. First section, more of just a general administrative overhead type costs for the engineering budget. The labor that we have, we've got two engineers, 5 technicians, and then 3 seasonal technicians in the department. do a variety of different services for regulatory permitting, right-of-way management, utility coordination, maintaining records for all of the infrastructure that we've got out in the streets, working with developers. So that's kind of the activities that are included in here. Budget, the general engineering budget's down from last year about 30,000 roughly. So that those dollars are allocated elsewhere, either in reconstruction projects, public works construction fund, that sort of thing. In engineering outlay, we've got two pieces of equipment. One's a replacement to a level that we currently have. It's just aged and can't be repaired. The other one is a new piece of equipment for construction surveying. And then the second component of the engineering budget is the maintenance accounts. The curb and gutter maintenance account that's in here includes engineering staff time for inspection and coordination and administration of the work. It also includes time from the street department for removal of curb and gutter and restoration work, as well as contract payments for the concrete contractor to place the new curb and gutter. Similarly, sidewalk maintenance operates very much the same way. We've got engineering time, street time and equipment in there, as well as contractor time as well. Very similar quantity expectation and budgets from last year moving forward into this year. Additionally, there's traffic control. This includes primarily maintenance and operations of the traffic control system. So there's a variety of different things in there this year. There's some dollars in there for traffic counts and retiming of A Street and a few other of the intersections. We did the expressway retiming this year, which was budgeted, I think initially in 2017, I believe. It also includes fees for water and light. They maintain, their electricians keep things operating. If something breaks, they fix it. If it malfunctions, they go out there and troubleshoot it. There's also some activities from the engineering side that, like speed studies, traffic counts, accident reviews, signal timing adjustments, those sorts of things that get rolled up into this as well. So I guess those are some of the highlights anyway.
Just a comment on the supplies and materials. One of the major reasons you see a bump in that, such a $52,000 jump in the supplies and materials, is Water and Light hasn't historically been maintaining a parts closet or maintaining some of the replacement activities or maintenance activities for traffic control. And so part of this is just it's a request to see if we can get caught up in some of those areas. You can see the detector replacements and some of those things, but just the head button failures and those types of
obsolete equipment, right?
Yeah, it's just taking a little bit more proactive approach to it, where over time some things have like back plates and push buttons and different things. Water and Light isn't necessarily actively out making sure that those things are being taken care of. They operate more on, if there's a complaint, they go out and check on it. If something stops working, or at our request. And so the proactive approach is, hey, we know there's deficiencies here. We're starting to actively identify some of these and get them in the budget to make sure they get done.
Another thing in the engineering budget you may notice is the curb and gutter maintenance work, the actuals compared to the last 2 years for the budget. The budget numbers over the years haven't changed, but we've been able to get more work done again, through trying to determine efficiencies and establish priorities. What we had in place was a program where the assessment process was so cumbersome that the engineering department just simply didn't have time for it. And so a lot of this curb and gutter work, these repairs weren't getting done, and therefore, we want to have that work done before we chip seal streets, before we do some patching, really for a complete project. And so, again, those in the Public Works Committee may recollect we proposed changing the assessment procedure for curb and gutter work, and it reduced that administrative burden substantially, and now staff's able to do those repairs as we're budgeting them and not just small bits and pieces. So, there's some efficiency efforts going on in the engineering department also to just try to streamline activities and make some improvements that way. We've done a number of things that have helped in that area, and we need to keep doing them to stay efficient. The requirements of the engineers continues to increase, and there's a number of projects that we'd like to do that we haven't had time for. Specification review, a number of traffic studies, things like that, and we're anticipating through some continued work on efficiencies and just trying to streamline the processes that these folks have to go through. We're hoping to carve out some more time for those activities.
So, Tim, what have we paid for in the last year, or even Joe might know, outside engineering?
So those are built in the project costs.
Yeah. But
and I don't have the number offhand, you may, but I can tell you that our internal costs on a project, percentage-wise, is 2 to 3%, and externally it's probably closer to 7.
Well, my question does it make sense that we keep hiring these outside engineering versus hiring an engineer over the long term, or are we coming out ahead continuously hiring these outside engineering
right
firms?
So we try to evaluate that on a regular basis, and
is that efficient?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It is from a standpoint that for the amount of work that we are financially capable to do, we're maybe just a little bit short in our engineering staff. And so, for example, this year, actually it was last year for this year's projects, we contracted consulting services to do some engineering work so that our staff could be working on design work for the 2019 projects. And that doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
We just needed to get ahead, and we hadn't been ahead for years. So we looked at that as a priority. Some of the other projects I know our staff would love to do. Some of the traffic analysis. There's a lot of neat projects that I know our staff would love to do, but we don't do it frequently enough to be cost effective and efficient at it. So those types of projects, we're still better off contracting those services on an as needed basis. If at some point in time, and at some point in time we will, we have 150 miles worth of roads and we are repaving a mile a year, right? Our roads will not last 150 years. So at some point in time, and it won't be soon, I can tell you that, there will need to be more monies budgeted for roads and streets. And it's not just for the installation, right? We've got to survey all this work, we have to design all this work. So it's gonna be a long-term, right? We have to do some long-range planning on if and when that happens, how are we gonna handle that? But for the time being, I think we're staffed a little short, but we're able to make do to some extent with efficiencies, and to some extent by using contract services when needed. I don't think right now we can justify another staff member.
And the pool and phase one, those are specific types of engineering, which really wouldn't make sense to have engineers to do that because it's too specific.
Yeah, we looked at, for example, on the East Riverbank project, the construction engineering, the field inspection work, we'd be totally capable of doing that. But we had a number of big internal projects. You know, our High Street project is a significant project, you know, where we just simply wouldn't have a field person to oversee that type of work. And it's different when it's our own staff, when we're overseeing our own work, versus the time requirements needed to oversee contract work. You know, when you've got control of it yourself, you can have a little different expectations than,
Right.
you know, someone that's, their job may, or their focus may be service, but at the end of the day, it's about profit, so.
All right. Yeah, so the commitment of your staff time, just checking and rechecking.
And it does change also if we were to expand our construction services, for example, and contract all of the additional engineering. You still need a significant amount of oversight to make sure that the engineers are doing the job that we need. And then the construction administration, even if you're hiring the inspection work done, there's still a significant internal component there. You know, so like I said, right now I think we're pretty well set. We are in the process of evaluating job responsibilities. We're anticipating some retirements, and for the last 4 months we've been meeting internally to talk about what those retirements look like, how we can improve and become more efficient in executing our contracts, performing, you know, how we're ordering materials, how we're overseeing our projects, and you know, and we're developing a plan to make that type of improvement. So I anticipate that you know, the new positions may look a little bit different, and they may not just exist in the engineering department. Maybe 5 or 6 months out of the year they'll essentially be reporting and working out of the garage, and the other part of the year out of the engineering department, you know, and sharing back and forth like that. But we are actively pursuing, you know, how can we improve and get more done, because I mean, there is no getting around it. The funding is very limited, and there's a lot of room for a lot more work that needs to be done that we just simply can't afford. So we have to be as efficient as we can.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're just not throwing money at nothing, because obviously when you take on an employee, that's a huge cost, and it's a long-term haul, and you know, if the time is right, then we need to seriously look at that.
Yep.
Versus continuing to throw money at outside.
And you think about like
but it's very
wastewater,
specific.
like the wastewater projects, those have been able to be accomplished engineering those in-house. I mean, like the river crossing. Those are good. I think at some point there's a tipping point to your
right versus, you know, because you know, if it's reoccurring yearly, then that's something we need to look at more.
It's more obvious, yeah.
You know, a project that was unique, and I don't want to dwell on it real long, but a project that was very unique was First Street last year. You know, we had a bunch of you know, DNR permitting. We had a narrowing of a roadway. We had a riverbank stabilization. You know, it was unique for our staff, both to install and to design. We had a lift station that our staff designed and installed, and you know, I was continue to be so impressed by that project. I'm in the process of submitting it for a national award because it was all done in-house. But that's a unique project, and our staff was up to the task.
I guess for engineers too, kind of what you engineer for, right?
So if the question were to be asked of you, what is the single most spot that we need to improve on in order to build efficiency and get more roads fixed, what would you say?
Well, I guess what's the I would ask the question, clarifying question. What's the objective?
Well, it's hard for me. I'm getting a little frustrated over here. So in one point, we say we got 150 miles of roads and we only fix one a year. But we're not going to do anything about it. Now we're trying to gain efficiencies with the people that we don't have. And at some point, there's got to be something that hits us right square in the face and says, we need this. And throughout the year, I've been watching this. Engineering costs, I mean, I think we have over $2.6 million this year in engineering costs. Specific projects, not specific projects, stuff we can do in-house, stuff we can't do in-house. Well, $2.6 million, and I get it, it's not a part of the tax levy, so we can turn around and do it on special projects, right? So we can bond for those projects and get engineering done. But it's $2.6 million in engineering. And I'm having a hard time when we sit there and on one hand we say we got 150 miles of roads, and on the other hand we're saying, but we're evaluating. We do a lot of evaluating in this community. We need to get some stuff done. And what I'm asking is in this public works discussion throughout the rest of the night, what is the most important thing you need? Kind of what Shane did with the parks is, we want to make sure that as a council that we're supporting department heads to getting their objectives done.
To get 2 miles done maybe next year.
Right. What can we, and it might not be 2 miles, it might be 1.5 miles. And what I'm asking is engineering the one thing that you can do to increase and getting more
By itself,
projects
no.
ready?
By itself, no. The best bang for our buck to get more work done is having additional funding and doing some mill and overlays. Mill and overlay, where it's not a full reconstruct. We take a street that's, 45, 50 years old. Base course is still good, the curb is still good, the infrastructure underneath is still good. Right now, we don't have a whole lot of choice. We're chip sealing, we're crack filling, we're extending the life as long as we can, and we're getting them. We've got some roads that are 70 years old, local streets. They won't make it to 100. 100 is kind of that magic point where all of a sudden the infrastructure underneath needs replacing as well, right? So if you can plan that obsolescence and do your maintenance work, do a resurfacing type project, continue to maintain that so that you can get your full life expectancy out of essentially two construction periods, and that would be an ideal situation. The challenge we have right now though is that with both staff and costs, right? I mean, we're trying to sit down with all of our department heads and try to evaluate. And the city's got a levy limit, and
But we're hiding 45,000 for aquatics of something that we don't even have here, and that's what I'm getting at is.
Well, there's transfer resolutions.
Look, I get it. How do we move forward, Joe?
Well, as long as there are levy limits, we're hobbled.
But it's strictly a sheer cost. It's strictly a sheer money thing. We need to throw 10 million at it and bond 10 million in order to get better projects let out, better engineering done, or our own guys at engineering, or. I mean, that's what's going to take is $10 million. I mean, I think I heard you say that it was $9 million for the next 10 years or 20 years that we need to spend
to be able to do 3
up.
miles. Yeah, yep, to get caught up.
But there's no efficiencies gained? Like there's nothing we could do?
Short term?
Yeah.
I don't, not without some additional funding and I mean, and that's the struggle that we have as department heads is we are limited in what we can do. We're looking for efficiencies to do more with what we have. And if we're able to expand and do a lot more, I mean, we could do a lot more miles of roads if we didn't do the underground. But the problem is our underground infrastructure is at an age where we have to be looking at it. We're almost not quite ahead of the curve, but we're a little ahead of the curve where it hasn't completely failed yet. And so we are able to pick and choose projects and try to, pick projects where we know that the underground infrastructure is getting close, so we're not maintaining the road. We're letting it fail so that we can spend those maintenance dollars elsewhere. It's not to the point where the other infrastructure is already completely failing. So there's the projects that require underground infrastructure as well as the surface, and then there's projects that just require the surface. It's the projects that just require the surface that currently we just aren't able to fund. The underground infrastructure projects, the utilities are helping out with those. The surface projects, we are not alone. Every municipality in the state is in the same position we are or worse.
Yeah, I just don't want to kick the can down the road so far that all of a sudden we have a catastrophe and run this a big pile.
Until there's a public desire for other ways to fund it, and until it becomes a public priority, wheel tax, allowing a referendum to allow funding for these street replacement projects, there's really nothing that we can do except try to do more with what we have. And if you're frustrated, you're welcome to the world of public
Well, like I
works.
said, I guess we can't improve more than 1 mile a year, so I don't know where we go from there.
So continue to maintain a good level maintenance budget is absolutely critical, right? I mean, you look around and take a drive on any other municipality's roads and see if you can find one that's 70 years old. And the reason why we're able to do that is because the council has allowed maintenance dollars to remain in the budget. That's critical. And I had it up a minute ago.
Is that what other communities are, I hate to say rating, but eliminating that maintenance, those maintenance dollars to where, or cutting them back, or potentially?
What I'll say is the way we perform some of our maintenance is a bit unique, and I think well advanced of what a lot of other municipalities are doing. The way our staff, and per square yard for our chip seal costs, compared to somewhere else, it might be a little bit more. But the results are well worth it. How we do our prep, how we do our crack filling in advance, not too many other municipalities do it the way we do it, and we get life out of our roads that others can't. Our local roads, the higher volume roads, we struggle with just like everybody else.
Well, and that's the same thing. Right now, Highway 13 South, from city limits to Saratoga Roads, right? The DOT just replaced all that all that concrete pavement with asphalt. There's 4 blocks of our streets that are exact same age. The DOT won't enumerate a project because the ride quality is higher than what that other part was.
We've done too good of a job of maintaining it.
So then you also go from Sampson, or from, 2 Mile, back to the expressway, which is, I think, 15 or 16 years older.
Yeah.
And they still won't enumerate a project on that because the ride quality is too well.
So just maybe a couple of comments. I think one of the delicate balancing acts that's in all of these pages of numbers is the fact that we do something very unique and try to find another municipality that's opted to do its own construction. And then there's a tipping point where, the question is, if you added more guys and another crew, would that allow you to do more? Well, I think, because we've opted to maintain that priority, there's a carrying cost to how much we can accomplish because we've got a group of staff that we're employing year round. And I'm not advocating that it's bad or good. It's just there's a whole nother methodology to how municipalities generally perform their construction. And so I think there's that component. The second component that you brought up was financing. I'm not going to propose it in this budget, but I think the county should very much consider a wheel tax. You've got over 20 municipalities in Wisconsin now that have decided to implement a wheel tax. Wausau to the north, Appleton to the east, Manitowoc just proposed one this budget cycle. Now there's a big debate between cities and counties who implements it. I would say the county should implement it, not the city, right? Think about how many wheels are outside our city limits that are driving on our roads every day. And I think we need to have a conversation at the county level to influence the county board to implement a wheel tax that allows for a cost share or revenue share between the largest municipalities in the county. Because this cycle, as you pointed out, is not sustainable, right? There's no way that we're going to be able to achieve a system that is to our standard. And I think, but I would also say we should pat ourselves on the back a little bit that from a ride quality standard or a Whistler or Pacer or any other statewide rating system, our roads are in better condition generally than many of the roads around the state. And that's pure fact. I mean, you can't dispute that. That's all based upon some of the rating data. So, I think we need to decide what is it that we want to do and what's the financing mechanism to get there. And part of it is, you hit on the levy limits. Part of it is you hit on funding streams. Part of it is we've opted to do a construction crew, our own reconstruction, as opposed to we give a contractor $3 million and then they go to town and get it done. So I think I'm not saying that that's what we should do, but I think it all comes back to we've obligations that need to be met through our financing vehicles, and we're going to have to decide if those things are relevant, if they're the most sustainable and the most efficient, because at the end of the day, we have an obligation to the system to maintain based upon the road miles and the quality the standards that we've set for ourselves.
Yeah, because we're not gonna get out of it.
Right. But a lot of it is outside of our realm of sphere of influence, right? Whether it's the connecting highways, and because we've done partial depth patches on A Street ad nauseum to the tune of a couple $1 million, right, over the last 10 years, and we're not going to get a reconstruction date out of the DOT as a result, right? And we did that to ourselves.
And the maintenance costs, we have to front 100%.
Correct.
We get some reimbursed.
Any state highway.
We get some reimbursed,
Okay,
or
we do.
transportation
Okay.
aids, but they don't cover the cost.
But-
I don't know what the spread is there between what we do and what we receive. I don't know.
But until they
There's
decide.
about 1.2 million, I think, in total
like
aids for connecting
320,000
highway and
a year.
general.
We get 300 connecting highway aid from the state.
Right.
So I'm not sure how off task this is, but there was obviously a significant difference in cost between asphalt and concrete. And A Street's concrete now, but at the city limits, it's gonna change. Is there a difference in how long one lasts?
Yeah.
But concrete's much more
Longer.
Yeah, they're virtually just doing a maintenance project on Highway 13 South. That's what they're doing.
completely tearing it up.
It's not,
They're calling it maintenance.
they're calling it maintenance.
Really?
Okay.
That's how they're able
Pretty-
to sell it. Because it was never scheduled. That thing literally came out of thin air.
Really?
That project, yeah. In the last 2
Well,
years.
you can drive through while they were doing it, and there's not. I mean, it's ripped right off.
Yeah.
So I mean,
So-
it's
So the challenge
Replacement might
that, so the challenge that we have here is in maintenance is trying to evaluate and perform maintenance work to keep our roads in decent shape on some roads that we know are obsolete and really done. We could continue to spend a lot of money on 8th Street and a lot of money on the expressway, and it would not be a good value to do that. It would not be money well spent, because the condition of those roads are so far gone. You know, it'd be like put new tires on a car that's got 250,000 miles and the engine's worn out. It is not money well spent. So what we're trying to do on these other 8th Street, for example, is we're trying to plan its obsolescence. We're trying to minimize and do the blow up repairs that we have to do. We're trying to keep the potholes out. But the fact is, the condition of that road is going to decline because it's not smart to spend money on it. And you know, we're looking at and working with the DOT on potentially doing an overlay, basically a grind and overlay or a pulverize and overlay on 8th Street, looking at doing something similar on the expressway so that we can restore the surface. There is no way they're going to enumerate that project. So we have to come up with a way for a significant maintenance project, very similar to Highway 13 South, and convince the DOT that that's a good idea, so that we can get another 15 to 25 years out of that pavement structure. And so that's our current plan, so that we can try to stick more money into these local streets and not throw money after that on the big road.
How many streets, how many roads, and how many miles do you feel that Waterworks and Light has that or any utility, not just Waterworks, the utilities are bad on?
Or near end.
Near life's end. Not talking pacer rating on roads, I'm talking just underneath work.
I can speak for, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head for water, but I can speak for wastewater because that was an exercise that we've recently done. Wastewater utility with the infrastructure that is 80 years old and older, we need to be spending about $800,000 a year to appropriately replace all of that infrastructure. So the projects that we're doing now for wastewater are good projects, and the utility is currently spending about that right now, and that's what we set the rates to do. Between our open cut projects that our city crews are doing and the lining projects that we have just started doing, that utility, and again, it's a rate structure utility, so you know we can develop, and we're supposed to develop sustainable and responsible budgets for those, and we have. I haven't done that analysis with water. I'd have to sit down with the superintendent at the Waterworks and Lighting Commission to really do that type of analysis, but I think it's similar.
But they've told us,
Yes.
based upon pilot, that we're at nearly we're over capacity. I mean, we've had some come to Jesus conversations with the water utility to say we'd like to do some more projects, but they refuse to exceed a certain annual threshold of water projects. So while we'd like to have beautiful street surfaces, and I'm glad you brought up underground because that's probably just as important, if not more, right?
That should be our driver.
Drive down the streets and see how many water and light water main patches we've got. It's ridiculous, right? The street surfaces in many of those streets are shot because of the fact that they've been degraded in advance prematurely. But if the utility's not going to commit to any more water projects, we're not going to do the street surface and then the rest of the utilities and then have them come back in 10 years and rip up the surface and start over. So I think that's another pressure point that we're going to have to push on, is to say, because in effect they have to pay a payment in lieu of taxes on it. That's the driver in all of this, that the more new infrastructure in the ground, they have to pay a pilot on it. And they're going to go to the rate they're going to the PSC right now on a rate increase on water. And how much of that is going to be reflected in new projects, more projects? None of it. It's all in other cost drivers. I mean, they don't have any cost containment measures, I think, that allow them to do more project work. So you can't have the conversation without talking about the water utility.
And I agree with that 100%, but I guess that pilot program or that study that you had done with the wastewater, that's an exercise that needs to happen with waterworks. I mean, we have to understand that. That's the easiest way. That's a cost sharing project that we can increase.
Yeah, I can't order that. I don't have the authority. I don't know if the council could order that or not.
What was the study? Because the pilot is the payment in lieu of taxes. That's another acronym. But what were you talking about?
Just the evaluation of the infrastructure and a sustainable replacement schedule.
Right.
Well, I've called for it every year when they spend $75,000 a year in water lateral and service breaks. I mean, it's ridiculous. Think about that. Over 10 years, they're going to spend $750,000 dealing with water main breaks around the city.
Some in the same spot.
Right. In the same street, down the street.
The cost that they budget for.
No, I apologize. Joe, what do you call that study?
Just replacement analysis,
Not that I want to tackle this beast, but isn't there anything that the council can do to direct?
They're going to come in with their budget.
Water and light. And
they're going to sit down here with their budget. I think that's the prime opportunity to start asking the questions that are being raised tonight. Yeah, right? I mean, it's a good conversation around how are we going to do more, right? And
especially if if our street surfacing is damaged by the continuous digging and redigging into them. That's our tax dollars doing, our taxpayers.
We are really taking a look also. Once upon a time, the utilities each paid 30% towards the resurfacing cost. So they replaced theirs. I found some old documents that we had. That's not currently the situation. And I'm trying to sit down and figure out what's fair on a street replacement project where there's good base course there, where otherwise, if it weren't for the underground utilities, we might do it as a mill and fill. We wouldn't necessarily do all the curb and gutter. Right. I think on those projects it'd be appropriate for the utilities to contribute towards the surface.
Would that cut down on the special assessments that our residents are responsible for?
That's an addition.
It would.
Well, if the utility's picking up the cost of the street goes down, thus the cost of the assessment would go down, I would assume.
Well, but I'm assuming since it's already in place that they would turn around and still apply it, right?
Yeah, I guess we'd have to sit down and look at our assessment ordinance and evaluate that, what's appropriate.
A lot of times the wheel tax, when those are implemented too, they're wiping out their special assessments. Yeah. And it's just about universal, I think.
And the other thing is, we talked about charging degradation fees, so that when water line goes and tears into our street, they get charged because they're shortening the life of that street. And that's a possible revenue source where you could put in a dedicated fund for special maintenance projects.
We've got degradation ordinance for our other utilities. We don't charge it to ourselves, and we consider the water and wastewater utility ourselves. The problem is, of course, that the cost to replace the streets borne on the taxpayers, not the ratepayers. So,
and we don't have any control over it either, in the sense of making a decision to.
Right. But when you look at the origin of where those fees are, they're being generated by utility fees and not levy or tax levy. And so when you look at your utilities, they're funded by a different group, obviously. You know, our taxpayers pay utilities, but also all the tax exempt properties.
Right.
Also pay utility fees, so it kind of covers everyone that uses that infrastructure. So when you look at the cost of, looking at the cost of street reconstruction or degradation fees, it's borne by everyone that utilizes that infrastructure.
The good thing is the ratepayer base of Water Works and Lighting is quite large, right? They've got Buren customers, they've got Grand Rapids customers, they've got, it's a far bigger base to draw on than just city taxpayers.
Ask your question.
Well,
how does that work?
Yeah, and we probably don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but how does the wheel tax work exactly? You said there's 20 other?
At least 20. I know they're popping up all over this budget cycle because everyone's being squeezed. They don't want to raise the gas tax. They don't want to.
How does it work, or how is it based on if you own
Like registration?
Number of wheels.
So how many? Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. It's a $20 per, or is it? They say $20 wheel tax is kind of the common number.
Yeah.
I forget if it's 20 per wheel or
So
if it's.
I thought it was
How many vehicles
$20
times
on your tabs at whatever
It
you
is,
pay your tabs.
yeah.
So instead of $69, you're paying $89.
It's a
for
registration fee, right?
So if you got 5 cars, you're dinged 5 times. If you got, a fleet of trucks, if you're a truck outfit like Holo, you're gonna be paying X amount of dollars on top of that for every vehicle you got.
Oh, okay.
I mean, politically selling it to the county, I think that's why the county is trying, why a lot of these places are getting through at the county level, because it's much more equitable, right? We're able to
Okay.
buy people out of their special assessments, and then everyone's getting, trying to make the argument you're gonna get a progressive revenue stream then, right?
Right.
Because hopefully your wheelbase is
Yeah,
growing.
because of local wheel tax, you look at the 17,000 people that live here, there's 60,000 people in the surrounding area, including who live here, and
Yeah,
and we all
75 in the
we all
county.
use the city streets. This is a hub, and when you look at the, I did this exercise for a recent presentation on aquatics, trying to establish what's a reasonable rate. Took a look at average household income, and as a region we average pretty well, but in Wisconsin Rapids we average a little bit low compared to town of Grand Rapids or whatever, and so for these types of activities, a progressive way to do it would be helpful, instead of continuing to ask the local property taxpayers who have the least capacity to pay to carry the entire burden.
Can you email me that paperwork,
Sure.
the one you dug up in Pelham,
Well, the 30%.
or whatever, I just
Yeah,
wanna see
We
the
can't
language
hear
on
you,
it.
you got your hand covered.
What's that?
I can't.
You're talking about
you gotta
the-
project your voice.
Oh, sorry. There's a reason for that.
The average household income data, that's what you're looking for?
I was looking for the records you found of the street surfacing being,
Street
the utilities
surfacing
being
or-
Oh, sure.
the 30.
Yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
curious why.
Just curious.
I'll make a
to
copy
see
of it and send it.
How that used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder
play.
why it changed, or
I don't know.
because it's a bad
It was
thing.
interesting. It was an
Very
interesting
Recollection
find. It
of
was
why
in
that shift happened,
Jim Neitzel's
when those utilities
Yeah,
stopped varying.
full files when he retired.
I mean, there's,
Interesting.
I don't even remember when that might have been even before my time.
It was long. Yeah, I think it was.
Because I mean,
This document was like late '60s, early
Yeah, there's a
70s.
lot of different things that we did, just like we used to put water and sewer in industrial parks, that the utilities wouldn't be charged for that, that the city paid for that.
Yeah, so there's an IOU for $1 million.
We changed that, obviously. Yeah.
It's a good thing.
But yeah, I think that's before my time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's late '60s. I think is. But
Before I was born.
it's on my
How's
desk,
that?
so I'll scan that and get it sent to you.
Thank you.
so do we have anything else for engineering specifically?
I think I got a little side stuff.
Kinda went off on a tangent.
Well, we're covering also some
It's kinda all three.
construction projects and streets. So we still have our street department, and we still have our public works construction budgets to review yet.
Sounds good.
Move on the street.
So then,
Make sure you holler though once engineering just starts tipping towards it makes sense to get an engineer versus.
Oh, we will.
Okay.
Yeah, we have those discussions on a regular basis as far as what our staff needs are, and I'm challenged well and appropriately when there's retirements and things like that. We sit down You know, and like right now, we're trying to master plan our engineering and streets, you know, anticipating some retirements and how we may make some modifications.
Yeah, I realize too that all these projects are very specific and you can't have a engineer to, you're not gonna have an aquatics engineer on staff.
We'll go to streets next.
Oh, one quick question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ike said in the budget here, 20,000 that we had for railroad crossing analysis. Did we ever do anything with that?
Not currently today.
So it's 0 to date, or to date it's 0 right now? We haven't hired.
Yeah, we
anything.
haven't spent
$50 there.
Thanks, Liz.
You know, if we went to Public Works construction, we could let Joe get back home to his family a little earlier. Paul's gonna be here for both of them anyway.
Yeah, Joel. Is it okay if Joel takes off then?
No, we gotta go. If we do Public Works
Okay,
construction.
I see what you're saying. Alright.
Okay, Public Works construction.
Page 83. I think some of this was highlighted in the email today from Tim, maybe?
I actually have up here.
Public Works construction. The email, you had.
Oh, yeah, that's
Report
just a
us.
document where I just kind of
Yeah.
took both the Public Works Construction Fund projects and the Aquatics and Riverfront and just kind of showed the funding, how the funding sources for each project is.
Because that's complicated. In summary, though, these projects are projects that were identified in our 5-year capital plan. In some cases, some of these projects have been designed for a couple of years. We're working right now on projects, 2 years from now, as far as design work goes. So, Chase Street, again, that's a street where the ride quality is horrendous, and it's because every 40 feet there's a utility patch. That's really why that. I mean, the street surface is tired, but as a local street, there's no reason, if it weren't for all the utility patches, that we couldn't continue to do some preventative maintenance and extend the life of that. So, but that's a significant project. That project is street surface, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, and water. Our 7th Street South project, East Grand Oak, is a project that needs to happen. The sanitary sewer there is bad, and it needs to be done prior to and in conjunction with the East Grand project.
I think those were all the details contained in the
Okay,
summary.
yeah.
So I'm not sure if you have.
If we really need to go through it, if you've got those project summaries.
Just gonna try to pull it up because
I got the email today, so I didn't really get to go through it much. So I guess if you want to highlight it, you could, Joe.
Okay, we're on, just got through
Either
7th
Joe.
Street.
Yeah. East Grand.
Moving on to East Grand Avenue, from the bridge to 3rd Street. Also includes part of 2nd Street as well, down to Birch. That's the city's portion of the East Grand Avenue project. It wasn't part of the state project east of there, but it does have street components, storm sewer, and water main as part of that. East Grand Avenue from 3rd Street to 8th Street, that's a STP urban project, so the DOT's involved, the DOT's contractor. It's 80% state funded for the street and storm sewer, and 20% locally funded for those two components, the street and storm sewer. The city also has sanitary and water main replacement planned for that project.
We just got that email.
Centralia parking lot, that's an ongoing thing. It's kind of evolving. Currently, I think by 2019 we'll be all set to do this parking lot finally. So
after 3 budget years of saying we were going to do it.
And that's if the roof on the Centralia Center doesn't go bad first.
That's going to give them a heart attack.
Yeah, okay.
Part of the money pit.
There's some concrete joint sealing. There's a project summary created for that, primarily on Plover Road from kind of the Home Depot area north to the city limits. That'll be, we did a bunch of it this year, and it's one of those aspects where the highway's in good shape yet. It's worth sticking some money into to preserve the joints. Concrete pavement patching, Wilson Street and 34, that was something that was actually proposed for this year that we went out to bid for. The pricing wasn't favorable for that, but looking to redo that again for next year. 1 Mile Creek improvements, there's quite a bit of background and history here, but
is that Woodland there? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that Woodland, the curved street there? We talking
on the north side?
Correct.
Upper side of the picture.
Lincoln Street.
Yes.
So it's Lincoln and Woodland down to 2 Mile?
Yep.
Okay. I just grew up playing in that creek my whole life. So I just wanted to make sure that's where it was.
So with the city being an MS4 community, it's a municipal separate storm sewer system community. It's a DNR designation that the city of our size has a stormwater permit through the state. Currently, we're required to remove so much sediment from stormwater runoff citywide. This pond was first looked at to get credits towards that sediment removal. Initially at the time, inline ponds, ones that are part of the stream, were not allowed to be taken credit for. That has changed, at least in this case. The DNR has said if the city were to get access rights to perform the maintenance, and where the water wheel is, that dam structure, if that gets properly permitted, the city could take credit for the sediment removal. That had kind of been backburnered because the regulations for sediment, we had met those. The latest thing is phosphorus limits that are coming out for the Wisconsin River, and that's where looking at this pond is to the tune of about offsetting costs of $2 million in equivalent stormwater treatment elsewhere in the city.
And just think about the location that gets consumed by those stormwater ponds is massive, right? The Norton Street Pond, wherever else we put these ponds, to the extent that we can get credits for this area will be a good thing.
Definitely.
So are we dredging all this then?
That would be part of the project. So it'd be.
I remember last time it was dredged. I was pretty young.
So yeah, dredging it, and then the dam, rebuilding the dam.
Is that one on 2 Mile with the water wheel you said? Okay. That's been there forever.
Yeah. Moving on, I guess the future.
So, I'm sorry. I obviously I live up on 12th Street, and so is it because of the flow? Because the pond there, it's nasty and green, and it's been horrible. Is that lack of flow, or I don't ever remember it being so horrible as it has been this year? And that's part of the same waterway for 1 Mile. Because that was all redone, I think, probably by the Housing Authority.
Sure. Yeah, likely it's stagnant water.
Yeah.
It probably has high nutrients in it from fertilizers.
People fertilizing lawns.
I don't know. It was an unusually bad algae year, kind of statewide, I think, if I remember right. It was
water temperatures are high.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem like it's flowing like it used to flow, or.
Yeah, I think the drought that we had this, 6 weeks, no rain.
Yeah.
So I know when my
middle
constituents come up and talk to you down further by high school,
my yard was sand by the
suffering with some
Yes.
stagnant and
Yeah, we heard more so from those residents this year than I think in past years up in that area.
yeah, they're
Of course,
starting to contact
most
me.
of it's so private.
It's all private
owned.
property, and none of that is part of a city property. So it'd be hard to justify a dredging project unless it was paid for by those residents as far as public benefit.
Sure. Then there's no way to increase the flow to get the water moving because we're limited by rain events, right? Kind of.
Yeah, there's a long story there too. There was, from what I understand, there were concerns about flooding, and so the city was asked to reduce the flow. The city did so, and then
No, we got
it's, yeah, so.
nothing.
It's kind of gone back and forth like that, so there's, I don't know all of the history offhand, but there's quite a history of too little water, too much water, and trying to divert water through storm sewer systems downstream of properties, and a bunch of different things have been done through the decades, I guess, but.
No solution.
Well, how do we include like a feasibility study for the 2019 budget to look at that from all the way to 16th Street, all the way down to, is it Lincoln Street where that new project is gonna start? What do we need to do to allocate funds for that, Mr. Chairperson?
What we need to do?
Yeah.
What do you
What's
mean?
Mr. the Chairperson.
Well, yeah, because my same thoughts is how.
Right now, our focus is meeting those phosphorus limits, and doing what we need to do to make that happen. You know, the other property owners that have property adjacent to the creek, you know, they can get permits and make modifications and do some things there as well.
Do we as council members get to like allocate project, I mean, do we get to choose projects, or do we just void projects that are proposed in the budget?
Well, the staff puts projects together. This would be a public works project, and the funding would
We
come
want to
from
throw
this
it in the
committee.
capital improvement
Correct,
plan so that we can design it
we
and plan it.
create a project or a suggestion for a project to be in the budget?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then I wanna do that. I wanna have a feasibility study to, potentially re-engineer, do something that we need to do
To get the water moving?
to get the water moving, and to eliminate, too fast of flows from 1 mile, on 1 Mile Creek from 16th Street or wherever that, on the corner of the Expressway and 16th Street, all the way to Lincoln Street there.
If I may make a suggestion, perhaps something to think about is when we do our transfer resolution with unspent funds due to vacated positions and whatever, to potentially fund that through the surplus or transfer.
Sure, thank you.
Because
I'd
we
rather
need
have
to,
the budget,
we
though.
need to
Sure, yeah.
sit down and try to figure out scope and see if that's something we could do internally or if that's gonna be a contract evaluation.
So the focus is reducing phosphorus. How does, lack of knowledge, but how does dredging, reducing phosphorus, wouldn't you want it to flow, or is it settle?
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay, and then dredging, obviously you get it out of there then, and then okay.
Now, to some extent, it's just a game, right? I mean, the sediment that's in there eventually will end up by the dam. And until it literally fills up,
Just
you're
like
not gonna
Quinault.
have a lot of
just like Quinault
sediment-based
Creek.
phosphorus disappear. And so, we're getting credit for it,
Yeah,
but it's not like we're gonna be removing a lot of phosphorus from the
Any additional phosphorus.
additional phosphorus, right?
yeah, because on the other side of that, I remember, because there's a, down in the creek, there's the guardrails bent from the last time I was dredging when I was a kid, when the crane bumped down on it, so it's been a long time.
On Lincoln Street.
It's on, just off airport, yeah. Yeah, that was a long time ago, but yeah, somehow if we can look at that flow issue to address, obviously I realize it's not city property, but it's still,
City concern.
it is a concern, yeah, stagnant, especially, I even look at 12th and Huntington there, that nasty green pond, you know, it just.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, do we gotta put
And
it on
I
the
think if the water flowed, it wouldn't be
the
nasty
next
green pond sitting there.
Finance committee agenda to actually have it on there. to
No,
be voted
you're
on.
talking just about the study?
Yeah, to create a feasibility study of what we could potentially do, because obviously we
That's a
don't
good
have.
idea.
Yeah,
Capital
Well,
improvement.
maybe you could just direct the staff to come up with an estimate so we know what we're looking for costs. And then once we know the costs, then we could look at the options of the budget and things like that.
Yeah.
So
to get the water, to address,
So I
so,
don't know how much that would cost, so I guess we got.
but you're still stuck at rain cycles and
Look at addressing it.
whether it rained or doesn't rain.
No, that sounds like a great.
And is it appropriate to spend city funds to dredge an area that's adjacent to a handful of private property owners for their benefit? I mean, that's,
Is it appropriate to have a sidewalk that goes underneath the water? I don't know, I guess.
Okay.
So how do we get that on the 2019?
So just normally staff comes up with
So let's
their,
ask Joe to put together what it would cost to
and then,
look at getting water flowing or to address that.
and then, I mean, then next meeting, I mean, or whenever it's ready, then it comes, the next meeting we'll approve it and
That's fine.
it'll get done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You are welcome, Mr. President.
All right, so that's interesting. I didn't realize phosphorus technically sunk.
I guess what are the credits are obviously a benefit to us, right? So
correct.
but
So
how-
we're doing this essentially for the credits, because if we don't, we'd have to construct larger stormwater holding ponds to meet the formulas that the DNR sets out. That same reason why we have some of the street sweepers that we have, not because it's what we want to have or because it works particularly well. It's because in order to meet the formula, we have to have that particular piece of equipment.
really?
But the whole TMDL phosphorus issue is, it's going to cost the state of Wisconsin billions of dollars, and you will not see any improvement in our waterways because it's not a comprehensive solution. It's taking this much out of a huge problem and spending billions of dollars to do it and not addressing what's left. And that's, I've been very frustrated with that whole process ever since the legislation passed. And again, it's people trying to do some good things and improve the water quality, and I'm all for that. But at the end of the day,
Is it really being
this won't result in anything,
Right.
except an enormous expense.
Money, right? Sorry.
Okay. Oh, that's all right.
On to the big one.
And before I do the East River Bank one, there's one project summary that's not in here for 12th Street sidewalk from Huntington down to Wood Avenue. It is in the Public Works Construction Fund budget. It's just not identified in a project summary, but
Long overdue in my book.
similar to 10th Street, but
That's all. I drive that every day. and
Some of the
it's-
residents disagree, but I agree
Yeah,
with you. It should have been done when they put those, when it was
People walk
developed. That street was
every
put
day
in.
on that road. I see them all the time.
In the wintertime, they're out in the middle of the street.
Yeah, wheelchairs on the
Buggies and
street.
Wheelchairs and
Cool.
scooters and, yeah, it's
Same argument on high.
it's just, yeah, it's just not
Thank
safe.
you.
So the East River Bank Trail project, phase 2 is proposed in the 2019 Public Works Construction Fund budget. I guess just to provide a little bit of background with that project. The entire thing kind of started back in 2013 when a UWSP student, I believe, had done a report. I don't know how that report or arrangement was made, but it primarily looked at the waterfront, looked at some of the concerns with erosion and different aspects of utilizing the space. One of the concepts that came out of it was including a recreational trail to, you can fix the bank stabilization issue and you get a benefit, more use out of it. In 2014, the engineering staff had put together design and bid documents and went out for bids for railing replacement in Mead Rapids Zoo Park. And that came before this committee, the finance committee at that time. And the decision at that meeting was to, given some of the things that were going on with the railing replacement and some of the other needs and ideas, take a step back and let's look at the whole waterfront and come up with a plan for the whole waterfront. Make sure, that what dollars we're going to spend on a railing, or whatever, kind of meet the comprehensive plan. So in 2015, the city applied for Wisconsin DNR stewardship grant dollars. for phase one. And then preliminary design reports were ensued shortly thereafter. In 2016, the city applied for Wisconsin stewardship funds for phase two and moved into final design during 2016-2017 for phase one and phase two projects. Of course, we're constructing phase one this year, and then hopefully set for phase two in 2019. The total cost of the improvements about $1.5 million. The grant amount through the stewardship funds about $625,000. It's a 50% match, so we're sitting around 1.2, 1.3 sort of grant project, and then a couple $100,000 additional there. But that's kind of the background with that project. There are a couple.
I think this project's a good project. I don't think we should have it in the budget. I think with the triangular project that is projected to happen and the amount of money that we have to spend as a community in order to get that vibrant, I think that should be maybe a little bit more of our concern to clean up the downtown area. But I do like the fact that this is a ready-to-go project and it's already designed. So I feel that if money were appropriated to this project right now when we have other things that I feel maybe should take precedence over this project, and money should take precedence over this project, but I like the fact that it's done, it's studied, it's designed, it's no questions asked, and next year if the money that potentially the city has obligation to and should have obligation to gets done, then I think this is a great project to put back on the books. But I'm not in favor of this at all.
So you give up the $600,000 worth of grants?
My question.
And then the city in 2 years might pay $1 million instead of.
I don't think this is appropriate for what we have to pay for. I think there's other projects out there that take precedence over this.
I think it'd be irresponsible not to follow through with this, with the money that's on the table and how far in we are.
There's no reason we couldn't apply for the grant in 2 years.
If it's gonna be there.
Yeah, but there's no reason we couldn't.
And if
we applied for it in 15, we applied for it in 16.
It's there right now though, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those projects where, you know, staff's been working on this for years.
6 years now.
We've got items in the park that are deteriorated significantly, the railings, things like that. I mean, if you could take a walk up there, it's getting hazardous. You know, there's a number of components to this project that it's basically maintenance type components. So
yeah, we can address the maintenance type components too.
Joe has a cost breakdown for those that are interested in the 1.5, so you know what you're, what's included in that budget. It's not a bunch of nice features that might have been proposed in the concept master plan. I think you'll find that this phase and the proposed phases, we can continue conversation beyond this too. But I think you'll find that this is much more a foundational budget and proposal than something that's a pie in the sky. And I think if you talk to 10 of your constituents, you'd find that Veterans Park remains one of the nicest parks that the city has. It's also the park that hosts the most amount of community events. It's the park that generates the most amount of activity in the summertime. It's also a park that raises, brings the community together, whether it's every week lunch by the river. I don't think I've seen any of you down there for lunch by the river, but I would suggest, making time over the course of summer to get down there.
I usually work out of town, so I can't really get down there on a Thursday.
But maybe when you've got a scheduled job in town, that might be an opportunity, or in the evening. They do a lot of evening events down there. But it's definitely a celebrated park, and I think if you had children that were playing along the river railing, either in Mead Rapids View or in Veterans Park, you have to be a pretty responsible parent, I think, to let your kid play along the water and the railing. But you'll find that a lot of it, as Joe said, it's hazardous, and I think it behooves the city, if we're going to be stewards of those public spaces, that we address those maintenance concerns. So Those are my comments. I think you'd also, if you asked community organizations that hold events in these areas, there's a lot of potential that's unmet. And I think, address the concern about the Triangle project, I think it's apples, oranges, and bananas to talk about that in comparison to this project. There's no proposal in the budget, nor do I expect to stick any taxpayer dollars, levy general fund dollars to fund any of the construction of the Triangle. That's a private project. That's an economic development project. We're talking about community spaces that have an overlap here with economic development, but we're not funding any of the construction, nor are we proposing to fund any construction from the Triangle project. Now, not to forget though, I think if the Triangle project develops with a TIF in place, we'll be able to utilize those dollars for other improvements down the road. But we don't have a construction project necessarily in our hands today from the Triangle perspective.
I can tell you right now, I can talk to 10 of my constituents and they'll tell me they'd rather have roads. This is $1.5 million we could spend in roads.
Well, the stewardship grant won't cover roads.
And once again, we can apply for a stewardship grant down the road.
But, right, the city cost of this project isn't
1.5, it's
900,000.
Yep.
So I mean, I don't think the point of this meeting is to scrap the project, unless
this would be the time to do it, if that was something that wanted to be done.
so. I mean, I'm not really in favor of that, but
Well, I mean, we do gotta come to the day of reckoning because
we will. Yeah.
we gotta balance the budget. And we've seen already that a number of departments have got increases, so where's that funds gonna come from? Without levy limits being eliminated or any possible other taxes, I mean, not necessarily looking at this, but in overall, we gotta balance the budget, so we gotta find some money somewhere.
Well, this would probably, I'm gonna assume is part of the bond.
Correct. If you look on the second page of that email I sent you, it shows, East River Bank Phase 2 shows you the different activities that are breakdown of the project, and then underneath the revenues, you see how it's funded, which is a $625,000 stewardship grant and $912,000 of debt proceeds.
So looking at this, I guess in my opinion, the Riverview balcony, it's kind of, let's say, luxury item out of here. It's not a necessity or a maintenance thing, it's an aesthetic. As long as we're doing something down there, this is the time to do it kind of thing.
When I think we're looking at it from the perspective of a revenue generator, that is the one feature that generates potential cash.
I guess
the improvements.
Yeah, and with that, I know that it's been an issue because I have gone down there and I've watched my daughter dance and other events down there. Is that balcony, would that also be an area where they would probably do a lot of Lunch by the River type?
We'd see probably more wedding and special event requests for that balcony. It's also a facility that we've considered doing open container licensing, so potentially license an operator to operate and sell wine and beer out of there. So I think that's the thought behind that particular feature, is that there's a draw to it that would generate some revenue beyond just a nice balcony. I mean, I think it'd be stupid for us just to build a balcony there for the sake of that. To your point of luxury versus what's the utility to the taxpayer here? I mean, if you're thinking about the Hotel Mead, when they generally host conferences and events, they're always looking for pre-meeting type reception spaces. And while we have some, there isn't really any outdoor space that's conducive to it, and they voiced to us that they'd like to do some things in Veterans Park, but there aren't places for them to hold those types of receptions.
We don't have a flat area.
Right.
Hate to go back to the old days of the grandstand.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
We lose a lot of those. I think we would gain a lot from Bullseye Country Club, who's put in some improvements to their patio along the riverfront, but it's off property, it's away from downtown. I think it's, from folks that have looked at the designs and voiced a lot of input on it so far over the course of all those public meetings, was that is one of the features that I think would be the most interesting and the most opportunity for some revenue generation. We hear a lot about open container in the park, and it's hard to do open container given the amount of bars across the street. But with something like this where you've got a space that can be dedicated for events, that's the rationale why we believe that this is a worthy feature to include in a request.
Yeah, because it is almost $500,000
Right.
of it. So it seems to be the most expensive part of it. Do you have something to do?
I was talking to myself.
Okay.
I just found a font error on my. Sorry.
New Roman. John Fanta just messaged us. New Riverwalk is good. I don't know what he's doing back in town. I think he's out of town. Do we want to talk about aquatics at all?
Nah, we can.
Since we're on that page.
The only thing I really struggle with in phase 2 is the river balcony. But yeah, I agree that the railing and all that is horrible down there. Yeah, we can talk about aquatics too.
Tim, maybe you can explain the rationale for why the aquatics, talking about aquatics specifically.
Sure. I mean, as far as the budget is this is based on the budget from last year of the original kind of the facility, aquatic facility cost estimate, and then basically around that $12 million, and then this reflects the amount that we spent on design costs and bid documents. And then based on the funding is based on the city had committed, $5 million approximately towards this project. So the long-term debt proceeds, in 2017, we borrowed half of that, $2.5 million. And then you see that unspent bond proceeds, basically the amount of proceeds we had less the costs that we incurred to date. So we're carrying those forward to apply to the project. And then the long-term debt proceeds show our other half of that $5 million commitment. And then the rest, the gap being funded by gifts and donations.
We did give our $2.5 million budget, grant request presentation on yesterday. Right. Only yesterday. And we should know if we're advancing to phase 2 or part 2 of their consideration, or round 2, I guess, in the next 6 weeks. And then if we are successful with that request, we'll know shortly after January 1st. So I think based upon schedule of any borrowing or bonding that we do, which generally happens late spring, early summer, we put in there in the budget for those numbers, but obviously it's heavily dependent upon being successful with additional gifts and grants and donations. So I'm not proposing that we change our original contribution or commitment, which was $5 million. I believe that we can get $4.5 million in grants. It just seems to be a matter of time. And I think once we get if we were successful in the $7.5 million, that effectively puts us at 75% of project cost. Because while we have 11.6 in there, the aquatics facility and related infrastructure is about $9.5 million. So conceivably, and as the other donors have told us, if you achieve 75% of your fundraising, then they consider it a much more viable project than 50%, which is essentially where we stand today with the city's original contribution. So I think between interest rates that have been favorable in the past and slightly higher interest rates as we go forward, being cognizant of that as well, that it's going to cost us more, not only from a construction bid perspective, but just our own borrowing. And that I think we need to figure out when the time is right, when we have the confidence that we've got an actual project funded here.
So so was there a specific ask amount of your presentation?
2.5 million, yeah.
And what have we raised? What have we gotten in gifts so far? Not much.
We've got a couple hundred gifts of about $500 to $50. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all over $1,000 gifts,
Yeah.
10,000. I don't know if we got any.
20 to 30,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've been saying this all, we need a pool, and the sooner we can get a pool, the better for the community. And I'm by far no means in favor of bonding any more than what we're already at, so I think a lot of this is gonna hinge on the presentation and that, and so.
I agree. I mean, they're the lead gift, right? There isn't another. I mean, there are funders with capacity in the community, but in terms of interest, they're the only funder that has said, give us a present, and has the annual capacity to give $6-7 million away every year. Right. So, I think they were the most worthy to get a large request. I mean, industry, Verso, for example, while things now are turning around and favorable financially for them, they want an executive summary to accompany their budget request to corporate. So, but that's not a 7-figure gift, right? That's probably a 5, maybe a 6 if we're lucky figure gift.
I think as it stands right now, I'm in favor of it going forward in the budget as is, because it comes down to, at that point, waiting to find out whether or not we had received a grant, and then at the point of actually borrowing is kind of when you're kind of deciding whether or not you're going to do this or not. And at that time is probably the realistic time to decide how we're going to go forward after whatever that date is, before January 1st. And, we can deal with this in the next year. But I think at that point, if that doesn't happen and those things don't start lining up, then we need to look at the project or what we're doing for the project. 'Cause I still think we need to get a pool in the ground or something for the community, whether it be this large aquatic center, or at that point, if things aren't lining up correctly, then we need to maybe reevaluate and see where we're at financially, because I would never be in favor of bonding for the whole thing. I don't think it's fiscally wise to do that, but if things start lining up, then maybe, I don't think at this time it's not the right time to say take it out of the budget, because I think we all recognize we need to do something in the community. I hope. Depends on what size it is, will really become dependent on if these people start lining up or if we're successful.
I agree.
Well, and to add to that, I think what you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Blazer, but if it's a case where it's a case where if this $2.5 million doesn't come in, what do we do? Because we're already paying. We paid the bond fees already, right, up front for the 2.5 or the 2.25.
The one we borrowed already, yes.
Yeah, the $5 million or whatever it is, the round number. We've already paid the bonding fees. We've already paid the upfront interest, and we're going to be paying on the principal. Actually, maybe it's just interest right now, whatever. So we're going to be making payments on this stuff. We have those proceeds. So the question is, moving forward, if we don't actually get that 2.5 million, we got to do something with this money or give it back. And I think that it might be irresponsible to give it back. On the other hand, we've also spent money on plans and drawings and everything like that. But we got to move forward and do something.
I think no matter what, we bond next year. So this will also kind of go into how much we bond. If something happens and those proceeds are still sitting there, it can reduce our bond amount, correct? That we're going to bond?
Yeah, the unspent proceeds
Right.
can only be, since they're bonds and they're earmarked for aquatics, it can only be spent on aquatics.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
if you didn't spend those proceeds at some point in time, it gets transferred back to the debt service to pay the bonds back.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that they were earmarked for a specific.
When they're bonds,
They're
when you do bonds, which is anything over 10 years and up to 20 years, it's earmarked for a specific purpose. It has to be used for that purpose.
Okay.
And if you issue GO notes, promissory notes, those are up to 10 years. You know, you designate these projects, but any unspent funds there can be used for any public purpose.
So I think really it seems that, you know, the prudent thing to do at this point is to wait to find out.
Correct, and I think that's where I'm going with it, is I agree with you 100%, that we don't wanna jump the gun right now. We'll see what happens, but if this 2.5 doesn't come in, I think that we're really gonna have to reevaluate where we're at and potentially even
Or the
switch
scope of the
gears and do
project.
something else. Yeah, aquatics related. One, the funds have to be because they're earmarked, but if we gotta change something up and get something in the ground for the residents who are paying the fees on this, that's the most appropriate thing to do, because
It's just long
we
overdue.
can't kick this down the road. This has been
It's
in
been
the
kicked down
works
the road for
since
forever.
2000, you know, so it's what, 17 years that they've been talking about an aquatic center?
Yeah.
So maybe
Wow.
2003,
It's
so it'll be
been-
like 15 years.
And we're spending $10 million now because it wasn't done
Correct.
7 years ago.
Right,
I
we're
mean,
paying
it
how
would've-
much-
this size
right.
facility would have been probably 6 to 7 million bucks, right? I mean, so yeah, we all gotta suck it up at some regard.
Right, and I
Just
think we all recognize that
Hearing that
something needs
here.
to be done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good.
Did we bond in 16?
We bond,
And then we bonded last year?
we bond every year, don't we?
Well, I mean,
For
yeah,
this.
I mean,
Oh, for
for this,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
we
yeah.
so
bonded last year for this.
2017 is when we issued the 2.5 million for the aquatics.
But we didn't bond last year for this?
This
No.
year,
Or this
Or
year.
this year?
correct.
Correct.
We did.
Did not this year. We did in 2017.
Did not, because we didn't, you know, at that point, we didn't have see, the whole point was that, you know, we borrowed the first half and then that would pay for the design and things and, you know, they
Just wait and
anticipated that
see.
we would start. But until now, until we know that we're at go, that's when we would borrow the other
So
half.
if this grant doesn't go through, not only do we have to look at switching gears, but we have to do it so it's in the ground and a go for this year.
Like construction for 2019, you're saying?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, we have to get something in the ground.
yeah. I mean, I think every
I mean,
every one of
year
us share
goes
that
by,
same
it's-
motivation. Yeah.
All right, I agree, we need to.
Because we're gonna miss another year. I mean, that type of commitment from the council and from staff has to be like, this will happen, and this will happen in a timely manner, so we're ready for it in June of 2019.
Right.
And is it feasible? I don't know what the length of the project is from a construction.
It is.
Would be
The latest we can break ground for a 2020 opener is September. We would just do winter construction, which is not advantageous, right? So I think as long as we break ground anytime between June and September, we'll have a facility open for summer of 2020.
But no opportunity for 2019.
No way,
Not at this point.
no way.
No, it'll take a
Not even if
construction
we just did a
season.
pool.
Yeah, not even a tank pool.
Should have bids out.
Right.
Yeah, but
It should have been all taken care of.
Yeah.
It should be in the works to get it done for next year.
Yeah, I think as
So
soon
another
as
summer without a pool.
another summer without a
Yeah.
pool.
Well, there has to be a immediate commitment from everybody that this will get done, so it's done in 2020.
I agree. Something.
And I guess I'm curious, the alternative, you know, is it going out to bid for new design services for a different scope?
I don't know if you want
Let it take
to
a
even
year.
talk about that right now, we'll just wait and see what.
Yeah, why don't we wait and see what happens
your
with-
grant is. So.
Okay.
Because yeah, how do we, if without that, how do we go forward?
Just because there's a 6-month lead sometimes in design services and then construction on top of that, I think we all share, as soon as we're gonna get something open in 2020 is now, right? So I think if we're gonna shift gears, we
I just
gotta,
wanna make sure I understood.
sure,
You know.
yeah, and I,
Well, yeah, then how are we gonna pay for it? Otherwise, if this doesn't come through, that's the other thing.
so I guess I wanna pose some questions, if you wouldn't mind, back to the riverbank funding, if I can, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we received aside from the one concern about rejecting the grant and going in that route, if we were to just consider the 675, whatever the actual amount was for the grant, it is a 50% match. So the total project cost of that grant is about $1.2 or $1.3 million if we were to accept the grant and meet the terms of the DNR's grant. in that, I'm gonna steal it. Yeah, go ahead. In that estimate, we included some contingencies. Again, this is an engineer's estimate. Our engineer's estimates ended up being low on some of the preliminary budgeting of this for phase one. So, I mean, we're hopeful for more favorable bid numbers to come back on the project, ultimately bringing the total project cost down. But I do want to point out a couple of things on the left side of the handout, and that's right above the 2019 budget number. Some of the additional dollars that were factored in there, contingency numbers, which we just finished that discussion on Tuesday night at council. You know, that nearly $200,000 of that project is contingency. Construction inspection, which Joe had said earlier, was an added value, and we felt was actually a good thing for us in phase one, because we ended up we're still on track to come in under budget, as well as look for cost savings throughout the budget that generate that. You know, so I guess my point is, we're talking about a $1.3 million project here, and in our thinking and our rationale, as myself from working with staff on it, is let's put forth a project that's very conservative, very scaled appropriately to meet the obligation of the grant. So, you know, a couple of areas I wouldn't propose that we eliminate contingency. We're going to start back to where we ended up this last time on phase one, that things happen, and maybe it's a smaller contingency amount. But generally, we presented a project that met our grant obligations at $1.3 million, which was our 50% match of the DNR grant, as well as the DNR grant. So, you know, I don't believe we can drop below that if we're going to accept the conditions of the grant.
I was going to ask that. So let's say if we dropped out the balcony, let's say, then we'd drop below and we would be eligible for the grant any longer? Is that what?
Well, it's up to, so I mean, we would just get, it's dollar for dollar, it's got to be matched, so we would just get less grant amount.
I just cleared it. It was something like, if we got rid of the balcony, it'd be like 586,000 or something. So that's all we'd be able to match versus 625. But I just cleared my phone. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I guess that's the.
You know, and I agree with you is that, and I've been to a lot of things down there, and as the most widely used park, and for events and 4th of July and.
George, you have our anticipated.
Be there for a long time.
Well, I think it's the events we don't do. I mean, I think between the Visitors and Convention Bureau and the Chamber now having potentially new leadership, it's a good opportunity for them to hold some really high-quality events. I mean, this community does not do events very well. We've got some nice events, but we travel for events, let's be honest. We all go to communities where events are held, and it's because facilities that they have are superior. I mean, they're just better facilities. I think you look at the Wausau community, the 400 block is a draw because of the investments the city made. And, you know, I'm not asking for us to go above and well beyond our obligations or beyond our reach with what we felt was a very conservative and a very small, I guess, phase two from what some of the numbers and things we could have proposed.
So the other thing, I guess, to consider on this too is, and while this is an estimate based on our progress thus far on phase one, there's probably going to be about $180,000 that we're going to be under budget at the conclusion of that
Can't say that, it's not done yet.
It's not done yet. But that, you know, in your carryover resolution, you may not need to borrow as much if we have funds available yet from phase one that could be applied towards phase two. So just something to ponder.
So my question is, when does it stop? You know, when is the extra spending, and when does we keep taking money out to do construction but not do the real fixes in the community? And I'm a very heavy maintenance guy.
Well, I think a lot of it goes to funding sources, right?
Right, but this is out of.
I mean, we could have the best roads in a crappy place to live, and the beautiful roads aren't going to get us anywhere. They're not going to attract business. They're not going to attract residents. It's not going to be a place where you're going to want to raise a family. And without quality public spaces, the city is nothing, right? And so I think that's the balance that we're trying to strike, is we're meeting what we believe all of our obligations that we can meet with road maintenance and road reconstruction, and then adding incrementally some quality of life and quality place initiatives and investments. We are incredibly conservative fiscal budgeters in this community compared to cities around the state. our total borrowing is far less than other communities around the state. And so I think when we compare ourselves against benchmarks, like-sized communities, similar populations, similar demographics, we've got to climb out of that shell in order for this place to be successful in the future. And I think about this budget, and I always ask myself the question is, do I stand behind this budget as a place that's going to make this place a better place? And if it doesn't, I don't believe any of us are doing our job. And so I think you can't do it overnight, you can't do it with one budget, and you can't do it with just dollars. It takes a lot more to make that happen. But when we look at being fiscally responsible, I believe that every budget that I've been a part of, and I think my predecessors have done a great job of really towing the line and keeping costs down. I mean, the costs of our governmental services are on par, if not cheaper than other places, and I'm proud of that. I think that's something that we all have to pat ourselves on the back for. But you're not seeing us borrowing $10 million a year on fun, nice things like other communities are. We're very conservative, and I mean our output is very conservative as a result, and we got to live with that.
I don't know, I yield a lot of phone calls about our spending as a community. So to say that we're conservative, I don't necessarily agree with that. We can obviously pick out projects that we're trying to push through, or stuff that we've done in the past to say that we're not conservative and that we are overspending as a community. So
compared to what?
That's what I'm asking is, what is our thoughts?
I mean, I'm curious to know what the response is when you get accused of being an overspender. Compared to what? What I would ask the caller. Give me a concrete example.
You're telling me you've never been approached and never been talked to about overspending?
Oh, I asked the question. I say, compared to what? If you say our roads are crap, compared to what? Compared to who? Compared to, give me, you can't just say that. That doesn't substantiate an argument, in my opinion. And I think the same goes for those callers when I'm curious to know, point to an example where just because they don't like a project, does that mean we're overspending? Or what their whole motivation and premise is. They think our priorities are wrong. What should we be prioritizing? And tell us how to get there. And we've had a long conversation tonight about just infrastructure, basic streets. We haven't talked anything about wastewater. Wastewater budget is not in the room tonight. Can't wait for wastewater to be in the room. We have that conversation. So I think the reality is, I mean, city staff professionally has put forth budget requests that they believe, and I support, because hence why I believe that you all should be working on them, is because I think those budgets meet our obligations. But we also have constraints that we have to live within, and we can't just tear up 3 miles of streets in a given year unless we're going to, like we said, contract out and decide someone else is going to do our street reconstruction, unless we're going to get Water and Light to bend on how much water main reconstruction work they do. I mean, there's so much, it's so complex, and you start pulling a string, a lot of string comes with it, and not a lot gets done in the process. So I commend you for being very motivated and very energetic about trying to do more and get more accomplished. But short of borrowing for operations, we just can't do those things. I think it's borne out in the conversations when we do, are we going to do leaf pickup or not? Are we going to do brush pickup or not? I mean, those are all activities. If our top priority is road maintenance and quality of our streets, then all of our spending should reflect that. We shouldn't be doing all these other services and spending $500,000 on compost sites every year. I mean, that's real money that we could be allocating for some of these other maintenance activities if they are our top priority. But I think residents, they'll tell you, they've got a list of priorities beyond just the quality of streets, the right of streets that we have in town.
It's unfortunate that you took my comments as that's the only thing I look at. But it's funny to hear your response, so thank you very much for your time.
Well, I guess staying on East Riverbank, that's what we're discussing. I guess any thoughts from the committee? I haven't heard yet.
I struggle with the balance. The necessity of finishing phase 2, I think, is there absolutely, because it is kind of quality of life and probably one of the highest use places. And I agree with Lee. How do we get ahead of the roads? Do we? we can't only have nice roads either, because that kind of defeats the purpose.
And I think it's also an evolutionary process, right? You build it, you can't get to where you need to go all in one shot. It comes in bits and pieces, and
Well, here's 1.5 million that we can get bits and pieces back.
I also see what Lee's saying, but I mean, this is a.
I guess if one part to improve, that's the area to do it.
Yeah, this is the area to do it. We're this far along, all the bells and.
I don't mind. I agree. I don't mind pulling away from something.
Yeah.
You know, if it's right. You know, I hate to spend money that's now gone to waste, but it's a so highly used area that everybody.
we can certainly look at our capital improvement planning process, because that, you know, as soon as we're done with the budget, roll right into the capital improvement plan, because these projects do take time to coordinate and design, and so, you know, if we're going to look at different road projects, and you know, I mean, that's the place to do it, because it would be really hard to all of a sudden say we're going to adjust this budget and do another street project. It just isn't. There's a time. I mean, it takes us. The design process is a year. I mean, our guys are out right now capturing data for 2021. You know, so we can certainly involve if that's the direction the council wants to go. It would just be really difficult to do it right now. I mean, that's why we're involved in the capital improvement plan, so we can guide staff and direct staff on you know, what we need to do, the studies we need to do, the design work we need to do.
That's in large part driven from Public Works, right, Tom? I mean, all the past capital planning conversations around what are the priority streets, obviously with the input of the utilities. I mean, that process, you have to build for it, I guess I would.
Yeah, if we wanna do more, than a mile of road, we gotta commit to 3 miles of road or whatever.
In designing 3 miles of road.
And ahead, which, you know,
But I agree. I think seriously we need to look at revenue sources, or working with Water and Light to keep from tearing up every road possible, you know, with water main breaks. But
Yeah, we had several ideas earlier. I think we need to continue to explore all those. That's what I'm in support of. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm on both sides. I see both sides of this. But
Yeah, absolutely.
the one thing we definitely can say we're going to do either way is move forward and explore these options we've talked about tonight. So,
but I mean,
for roads wise,
for me, this is a center part of our community, and
Well, it is a beautiful park right now, though. You know, and the one thing that I'm looking at is how much maintenance costs is it gonna cost us, because we just heard earlier that phase one is gonna have man-hours deterred here and deterred there for snow removal and maintenance and everything else. So where are we gonna find monies with budgets getting tight and tight and tight? Where are we gonna find money when this is done for the upkeep? And again, it's a beautiful park. You know, it's not a Taj Mahal park, but it's a beautiful place. People obviously congregate there, right? We heard that, lunch by the river, different activities and everything else. I mean, if we fix the hand railing, we do landscaping. I mean, if we eliminate this river balcony structure, that bring it really close to the matching funds, I might be able to support it there. But I can't support it at 1.5 million.
I look at the balcony, I think all the uses that could be done down there, all the lunch by the river performances that could be held on there. It's a flat, hard surface where it's not usable now. If we don't do it now, it's not something that you're probably going to take on till all this needs to be replaced again.
I mean, this could be the center of our community down by the river for decades to come.
So I struggle with that.
propose it be an up and down vote, all or nothing at the budget. We address it at the budget time. That somebody make a motion to remove the item from the budget, and then do an up and down vote. Make it easy. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time talking about it. Let's you know, how do the 8 members of the council feel about the item?
All right.
Okay. Do you have any other drawings or pictures or conceptual stuff?
Yeah.
I'd be interested in seeing
Same here.
Okay.
more of that.
Yeah. Send them out to you guys.
And then also, have you guys, is there any thoughts on the maintenance of it? Is it a wood structure?
Of the balcony?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's wood.
Obviously there's gonna be
wood in
wood
it.
and structural.
I think it'd be somewhat similar to the railing that's gonna be placed out there as far as maintenance goes.
Is the railing a wooden structure type thing?
No, it's steel, but I mean, just from the maintenance standpoint, I don't think it's going to be.
It's not a big.
It's not like you're gonna have to replace the structure, sort of maintenance. You know, like now with the railing, I mean, we're looking at replacing the entire railing because it's falling apart.
How about, I guess, since you're tackling the top side, and there hasn't been any discussions, but the wall itself, you know, how do we, I know that it was looked at after that really big flood that we had, and
There's some tuck pointing resources, at least the intended in this phase, that they would be addressing it from the front side, some of the tuck pointing.
At least under the balcony portion, trying to tuck point that with the installation of the balcony, because then it'd be harder to access after the balcony's in place. Certainly the rest of the wall has tuck pointing issues. That's one of the reasons that the stormwater line item is in here, is currently all the water's drained to the wall, both on the surface and underground, and it goes out through the wall. So in a sense, it's somewhat good because there isn't pressure that develops behind the wall, but yet, I mean, you always have water that's why there isn't any mortar left. And it does, when it floods, it does migrate out soil with it. You know, when the flood water, river water goes past the wall, it pulls soil out through the wall in spots.
And do we have any idea how much erosion is back through the wall there? Is there quite a bit, or is it just an unknown at this? It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell from the surface. I would say the clock tower is the one area that people are concerned about because of the settling of all that concrete there, and that's where the river flow hits first, right? When you're looking up for the dam flow.
There's also a couple of, I know there's, in the parks outlay, I believe it's proposed to include some of the future tuck pointing, through that outlay budget as well.
I guess I'm confused. This is a project that's supposed to, East Riverbank Stabilization Project, but we're not gonna tuck point the wall or address the wall. So it's 1.5 million that's not gonna address the wall, so we'd have to come back and spend money on it later? Is that what you're saying? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's my concern. Are we
Because,
doing the top before the bottom, or?
Yeah, so the top of the wall would get repaired in order to put the railing on top of it. The face of the wall, however, outside of the balcony area, isn't proposed to be tuck pointed with this particular project.
So we're not even, I thought that this was supposed to fix that.
I guess
You
that's what
gotta
I
be
thought.
kidding me.
So-
Oh, wow.
Well, we did do a geotech engineering study, Mr. Chairman, and maybe you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so with the preliminary planning efforts for this project, there was some geotech work done to look at the integrity, the structural integrity of the wall, to make sure that there weren't any issues that we needed to be worried about. In particular, the area just north of the Grand Avenue Bridge was excavated and looked at. There's some schematics that were put together in the report that documented everything that they found and what their recommendations were, but the base of the wall was some 8 feet thick and somewhat trapezoidal until you got to the very top, and then you see what we see from the surface, you know, maybe an 18-inch thick wall. So subsurface, it's a massive structure, and so structurally it wasn't anything of concern.
But in terms of tuck pointing, I mean, there were some recommendations that
Yeah.
it wasn't imminent. It wasn't something that, I mean, you spend maintenance dollars now, it's like a street. When you chip seal a street again, you don't do it right after you've done it, and you wait a period of time. And I think that's the analogy I would use on the geotech study is there's not a warranted need to tuck point the entire structure at this stage.
Not imminent need. I mean, it's eventually, there's one area underneath the Jackson Street Bridge. You get enough water that goes over the wall or through the wall. Enough mortar goes out and some stones start falling in. Well, it's a continual process, and over time, decades from now, zero maintenance, some stuff needs to be done occasionally, so.
But it is decades from now, it's not.
Nothing immediate. I mean, it's something that we're certainly looking for, planning for, right, preparing for, because it's at some point.
It's on the list, right? And as we evaluate what projects that we're doing in any given year, we try to maintain that list, and maintenance projects we try to fill in wherever we can, where we think it's appropriate. And so
maybe the answer to this question is obvious by your response, but so doing this and then the repairs down the road, whether it's 10, 20, 30 years, we're not, I mean, it's perfectly feasible. It's not going to jeopardize, I guess,
correct,
what we're doing on top. If we have to fix them, then it gets fixed, but it's not going to, okay. Alright. Well, thank you. I think everyone covered that rather extensively. What do you recommend to do next then?
I think we move on to streets.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I need an intermission.
Take 5 minutes, 5-minute break.
When I see 11 o'clock last time, I didn't actually.
Oh, this one is probably gonna be.
No.
Yeah, it is.
We're in.
It's almost bedtime.
I have a call at 10, so if that gets done late, I'll let you know. Jen will let you know, but 11 should work.
Okay, sounds good.
Or 11:30, whatever.
All right.
See you in the morning.
Sounds good. You guys have a good night.
Thank you.
Later.
Good thing there's not a Brewer game on tonight.
Not tonight. Not tonight.
Not for a long time.
Now it's they got
Tomorrow night,
now
huh?
it's that one.
Yeah. Make a few comments. You can send an email. Say from the perspective of a drone. Yeah.
What did you do?
No.
About what time it is? Huh? Didn't they used to have knockout, drag out meetings before Tom?
Oh yeah.
Back in the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. We've had them.
Trying to find $500 here, cutting it out of there.
Yep. And you wonder why.
Yeah.
5 hours and you save $2,500.
Well, actually, I dropped them off at Cindy's house. But then Dawn came back.
said something last week that.
Yeah, we were trying to catch her before she left. Well, so she's coming home either tomorrow or Saturday. But she's gonna go over and then she's gonna stay at that. Yeah, five. Oh, really? Really?
We're still on the air.
Yeah, and, you know, they said they're going to, you know, they're not really worried about the rest. Well, they said if it's cancer, it's very treatable. So, really, wasn't something where they can. What do you do? You gotta have a. Yeah. So, because at first I thought the. Budget too. No, there's like there's three of them. That's what they thought. Well, it's just not something that's that's my hair for a while.
So is that where your hearth at, is down in the Dells then tying steel?
No, down in the Dells, but not tying steel. I'm working with Capital Steel Erectors now, we're putting up convention center, so I'm actually doing the structural.
So it's part of the ironworkers then, so the trusses, the steel trusses and stuff like that too?
Yeah, anything that.
Well, what we've been doing too is taking a look at.
Ironworkers are, and I didn't know what an ironworker was.
But it is hard.
Carpenter does with wood.
To do things.
An ironworker does with steel. So tying rebar, setting the, let's say, the old picture of the guy sitting on the beam, you know, having lunch.
That makes sense on my, some of those,
and so like for engineering, I've got a list of
precast beams, you know, those ironworkers that set the beams, so that makes sense.
If we want to adjust that, 2 weeks, that's in your size of thing.
Bridge over the Wisconsin River on Highway 82.
What do we move here?
I got on, needed someone for the last 3 spans there. That's kind of fun.
We're doing the
Those
same
things are
thing
6
too.
foot tall.
These
particular ones were 160 tons. And so we had a dual line pick on that.
Those precast concrete
These
or
are all
those box fans?
But something's got to fall off.
I don't remember if it's Spancrete or if it was actually County Concrete that made these particular ones, but these were only 80 feet long. Way back when we went to the College Ave one, those were 155 feet long. Those were about 200 tons. Those were big. Yeah, they call them wide top because you know it's about 3 feet wide versus a steel girder would probably only be a foot and a half. But yeah, I think it's just crazy. Yeah, so
6 pages of questions.
Yeah,
I wasn't even thinking of it.
Oh, that's what all
what that was.
Now we get to the big budget.
Yeah, pages and pages of questions.
Okay, so I guess let's reconvene. Street department.
Okay, we'll start out on page 101. We actually have, I guess, for lack of better words, 2 funding sources. But you see on page 101, you see our staffing levels have been pretty much the same since, I think 13 and 14 is when they came to this level. But you go backwards to page 98, the stormwater utility, some of our activities are in there. You know, as we were talking earlier about the DNR requirements, we're required to sweep certain streets on a higher frequency than others, but for the most part, we cover every neighborhood once a month. That has probably been a little bit lax in the last year and a half or so due to some injuries and stuff like that where the operator hasn't been able to be in there, and so we haven't been having it out as frequent as possible. Also then that funding source pays for our storm sewer maintenance, so all of our catch basin repairs and things like that. Right now, we're the second year into one of our initiatives. On an annual basis, we go, or not us, but the wastewater treatment plant cleans all the catch basins, or not all the catch basins, it's 30% of the catch basins. Last year was the first year that we started to have them do an inspection of the catch basins also, so that we can start to do preventative maintenance instead of reactive maintenance. So this upcoming 2019 budget should reflect some of those things, where we're now able to take things out of GIS and same thing, they do a 1 to 5 rating on the catch basin, so we'll be able to identify stuff that needs, like say preventative maintenance, instead of waiting for a hole to fill in front of the catch basin and then having to replace all the rings and curb and gutter and patches and everything like that. So kind of the same thing, trying to do more with the same amount of money than what we've had in the past.
On that same note too, the same technology is used to determine how full was that catch basin. So we're just automatically doing it every so many years. Well, by monitoring that, we're gonna be able to schedule that maintenance instead of just go and check it and it, it's only half full. Well, all right, it'll get put off then. Instead of a 5-year cycle, that might be a 7-year cycle for the next one, so.
Good idea. The stormwater utility is also what pays for, like last year, I think we had 3 or 4 freeze thaw events in the winter time. It's also what pays for going around and digging out catch basins in the snowbanks and stuff like that. So then you go back to page 101. Like I said, there's our original staffing level. You'll see a slight increase on our stuff because we're hoping that currently we have 3 managers and 1 hourly employee that do weekend calls. So the increase that you're seeing there is we're hoping that 2 hourly employees step up to be relief supervisors and take call weekends. So that, obviously that's included in the manager's budget. And so we have to include that additional funds to pay the hourly staff to take the calls for that weekend. And then their time for, if there's a snow event or something like that is included in that.
Paul, is somebody coming out of the rotation, or is it to have 2 people?
The problem right now is Paul's in the rotation, and he doesn't get paid. So,
What do you mean doesn't get paid?
He's salary. He doesn't, and because we're short on the rotation, he's covering more frequently, and that's why that number is currently lower. So we're trying to get back up to the appropriate number of relief supervisors so that it gets back to normal.
Okay. Plus, I know he's a guy with the phone all during the week and everything else.
So then you have the training budget. We are going to have some retirements that are possibly going to happen this year. So just like we budgeted last year, we also have a slight increase there because our insurance company used to do our annual OSHA 10 training, and our representative took a promotion, so our current rep does not have that OSHA 10 certification for training, so that's something that we have to outsource now. And so that's why there's a slight increase there, that we didn't used to have to pay for that in the past.
So you said, I'm sorry, you have some people retiring, you said?
Yeah.
So does that, any changes on those positions, any thoughts on it yet, or is it just replace them as is, or?
Yeah, for the most part,
one-to-one, or?
That's what we're hoping to do, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if there's some thoughts on some other, okay.
No.
1 for 1, that sounds good.
Is this the only spot that you have training is in the budget?
Yeah.
Is there any training that we need to be doing more of? I asked you about that event that they do over in Green Bay, if you had been over there, and if we should send somebody over to that event. All municipalities get together.
Like the snowplow rodeo?
Yep.
Yeah, that's not
that kind of stuff. I mean, if we need to be doing that stuff, we need to.
Yeah, that's not really training. I'm not from what I understand of it, it's more of a competition.
It is, and it's different. So we plow very seldomly with truck plows with front plows. You know, we're plowing with loaders and graders, and so that particular activity really isn't tailored for our operation. But yeah.
But I mean, if there's additional training, we need to make sure
Yeah.
that. You
No,
you guys.
so that's not the-
keep us up on board. Maybe there's new equipment out there that's helping other municipalities and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so.
I just wanna make sure we're tracking this.
Yeah, so that's not the only training that we're doing as far as our OSHA 10 training or anything like that. Typically on an annual basis, we send 4 or 5 guys to the WCPA for concrete maintenance. So that typically covers like all the new DOT specs and the Concrete Pavers Association. You know, they're constantly looking at the industry and how to do things and things like that. You know, I think 5-6 years ago, white topping was a big thing, you know, where they mill and fill with concrete pavement rather than using asphalt and stuff like that. So they bring that type of stuff out. So I mean, that's also stuff that we send them to. Same thing, I challenged Mark in the shop, because everything is going electronics now, and we have very good mechanics that are, you know, kind of old school mechanics aren't the right way to say it, but the digital stuff is constantly changing and stuff like that. So we're sending guys to that type of stuff too. So I just didn't elaborate on it. I'm sorry. No. But yeah, that's where it comes out of that budget though.
Lift truck safety, yeah, all everything. Good.
Just want to make sure you guys have enough money to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then let's see. The next budget item there then is our street repair and maintenance. We've been constantly increasing our chip sealing over the last 3 or 4 years. You know, it used to be about 105 to 110,000 square yards a year of chip sealing. This year we only were able to do about 134,000. But we're pushing to get to the 160,000 square yards a year. That's virtually one every 8 years on our arterial streets and one every 12 on our residential streets or whatever. You know, as Joe said, I don't know if necessarily Jim started this or if it was prior to Jim, but they had a very good philosophy in the past on our residential streets. You know, we go through and hand spray all of our residential streets to get rid of the cross cracks and dips and everything like that ahead of time, you know, so we're not just putting a new surface on, we're sometimes making a pretty decent ride out of a 70-year-old street, you know. Kind of along to what you had commented on earlier, Lee, but we don't necessarily have an answer on it yet, but we're looking at adding to our street maintenance project on mill and fills, and part of that is you know, the wastewater treatment plant only televised stuff when we were going to design something on it, and now I think we're year 2 into a big initiative of trying to have all the city televised within the next 5 years, so then we can make better decisions, you know, on the proper way of doing maintenance, whether it's a mill and fill or if that street needs to be rebuilt or if we can just line the sanitary and stuff like that. So we're pushing in that direction. We're just not there yet because we don't have all the information, which is critical in making right decisions. You know, 5 years ago, we chip sealed the road, and then all of a sudden, one of the utilities decided that they wanted to replace the water main. So here we just dug up a 2-year-old chip seal road. You know, that's part of the reason why we went to coming up with a capital improvement plan, because you need it. You know, so
and we're mapping it so the staff out in the field sees that layer all the time. You know, you're thinking about replacing sidewalk, you're thinking about replacing a curb ramp, you're thinking about replacing or doing you know, some hot patching or something like that. Oh yeah, it's a capital improvement plan project. In 4 years, we're just gonna forget about it. So we made some improvements there.
Well, I think a highlight too has been when we've done some lining on our sewer projects as opposed to doing a full replacement when it makes sense, right? So we're able to move those dollars elsewhere. So Chestnut Street, for example, we lined the entire sewer on that. So, you know, from the standpoint of having to replace it or maintain it, sticking a few dollars in there instead of having to dig it out, I think. And then to the point around the street repair and maintenance is, when we were talking in our budget conversations, challenging staff to come up with a mill and overlay plan, that is something that we can put forth to taxpayers and say, well, if we're concerned about our ride quality and we're not going to replace the underground infrastructure, let's make that a candidate for a mill and overlay. So you're taking the top couple inches or whatever they mill off and then doing a new street surface. So you're actually, it's kind of a placebo effect because the streets looks new, but it's underground, it's not. But I mean, I think that's going to have to come on the heels of this, and we're going to have to figure out what we're going to adjust for financing for those things. But I think that's a big opportunity, is the mill and fill or mill and overlay projects.
So in the contract payment, you'll see a reduction of $58,000, and that was just a one-time thing. 2017, there's not too many, or 2017, the engineering department put out for bid to get West Grand Avenue resealed, and we couldn't get anybody to bid on that project. And so what I did is I included an additional $60,000 in our budget to try to get, because then they put it out for bid again this year. And I wanted to get more done, because a lot of the stuff that we did on the expressway was because we didn't maintain the expressway when we needed to, and resealing the joints and stuff like that. And so, Highway 54 and, West Grand Avenue is 13 years old. Highway 54, I think is like 16 years old. I think that was done in 99, so we're like 5 years behind on that. And so I really wanted to make sure that we got a good chunk of that so that we were catching back up on it. And if most of you guys, you just voted on it the other night, but so the engineering department, the numbers came in well enough where we were able to eat off a bunch of it, and the contractor wasn't willing to spend another week in town to spend that $68,000, and so that's why we transferred that out of there. But it was removed out of this 2019 budget, so that's the only reason why there's a reduction in that contract payment. The snow and ice, that's a shot in the dark to see what the winter has been or was going to be, but it's virtually based on averages over the last 7 or 8 years of what events that we've had. And then obviously last year we switched how we were plowing snow, because we now use 6 graders and 3 loaders instead of, 6 loaders and 3 graders instead of 5 and 4. So some of that is just rental rates and things like that being adjusted. So our brush and weed control is kind of the same thing that we've constantly done. The only difference in that is that we tried to get a company in here this year to take care of the cutoffs after we cut them, so that we don't have to continue to go back to the riverbank, and the timing just didn't work on it. But the luxury now is that we have a licensed applicator on our staff now, so we'll be able to do that right behind our cutting, so we won't have to hopefully go back on the riverbanks every 9 months. So street signs and markings, there's a slight reduction in that because it's the last few years that I've been doing it, we've been kind of having a little bit of a surplus on material purchases at the end of the year, which mostly comes because of us actually purchasing our materials this year for next year. And so that's where the reasoning is for that reduction there, is that we were just far enough ahead of ourselves that there can be that reduction. The garbage collection, I guess that's kind of based on 2 practices, right? So our first is how we currently pick up garbage, and then hopefully here in April and May we're going to be switching to an automated truck. So then that is our single pass there. It's still an increase of $400,000 because we also are showing the purchase of the carts on that. That also includes currently of having the vendor do the distribution of it. But that is still yet to be decided because of the headaches that we had last time, but we'll cross that road when we get there, depending upon what our current activities are.
Do you have any sort of data that backs up the automated recycling? How much of a reduction going to one guy,
Cost savings?
Like for example, one of the benefits on the automated recycling is that because it's not a can carrier position, it's an operator. We're utilizing that person, is it 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, for other activities. And so we're able to get some of our additional mowing, some of our additional work done that we've been a bit short, because it's quicker. And he still has to do truck maintenance, so you can't do them 5 days a week. But I mean, that's an example. But Paul's got numbers. I mean, we've had significant increases in our volumes, the mass of
people
recyclables. Yeah.
I'd just be curious to see the numbers. I don't think we've ever, we talk about celebrating successes. I don't think we've ever really elaborated on that. And it's just good for the council to know and other people in the community to know, because we're obviously going
today. 44% increase over the same period of time in 2016, year to date.
Wow.
Recycling.
44%.
44% increase.
Wow. No, I mean we gotta celebrate that stuff. I mean,
It's huge.
Yeah, so I guess that's why, if garbage collection, slaps you in the face, that's probably the biggest reason, is just because of the $500,000 of cart purchases on that versus years past. Yeah, then we're, hopefully showing, or we're showing a possible decrease in tipping fees or whatever too. That's just, kind of an estimate as to what that's gonna be.
You have to confirm with them about the rates for the residents.
Yeah, I did. It is in there.
Yeah, and so I don't think.
So I'd be curious as to what they were gonna charge you per ton, because it doesn't.
I've got the slip.
Yeah, we never touched base when we were playing phone tag when I was in the middle of the soccer field.
So yeah, because I went to the dump and I don't think Rapids residents are being.
Yeah,
we can check though.
Yep.
Sanitary landfill, you can't call it a dump anymore. Sanitary landfill.
The landfill. So yeah, we'll hook up.
Sure.
Or I'll show you my receipt.
I go there also enough, they don't ask where I live, so.
I know that's the other thing.
They don't, I didn't even know that there was a different rate.
Yeah.
So I'm guaranteed I'm
And there might not be.
Okay.
But it just says in the contract that Wisconsin Rapids residents shall pay
the same
the contracted rate, or the same contracted rate as the city of Wisconsin Rapids.
And I asked that if there was any difference between any communities, and I was told no. So
According to that.
Mm-hmm. Unless we're all the same rate anyways, I don't know.
It could be.
We checked into that.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, so then going through, we operate the 2 compost sites under composting. That's also our spring and fall leaf cleanup and our monthly brush pickup. And then taking care of the compost sites and moving and screening the compost. So that should be pretty much it. I guess we're, like I say, the biggest slap in the face is the increase in the landfill or the garbage pickup, simply because of the carts. So.
That's a one-time thing.
Is it one cart per residence? But it's 96.
You've been watching this televised meeting.
Well, I remember I think I even asked a question at the last one.
So I'm working on the draft language right now, so.
It is pretty long. Yeah, and those.
Kind of public works.
And those, there should be, the end of the month, coming very quickly here. There's gonna be letters that are being sent out to the property owners because they are gonna be given the alternative to go to a 48-gallon cart, just like they were for the recycling carts, so.
Why? You only get one though if you go to
You'd only get one, yeah. So if you choose not to have.
You're
the
losing a lot
96
of capability. And I know, so there would, nothing else would be, like if you had an old chair you wanna throw it that couldn't fit in the bin, you gotta haul that yourself now, okay.
Cut it up and put it in the bin and close
Cut
it
it
up.
up, yeah. Okay.
So any questions for Paul? Start with Lee.
I apologize. So one, a couple questions about compost. We own the land around the water tower, is that correct? Is there any way that we can start moving that compost site to the backside of the water tower? So when you're driving by Home Depot that you don't see piles of compost sitting there?
The land that, as far as.
That school district right by the water tower that they
As far as we are, is as far as we can go back, I believe. I'm just gonna check on the map.
I think that school district.
I know it is further, I don't know right by the water tower. You know, we bring in all these people for BMX. They got a park next to
there
our
it is.
compost site. You know what I mean? Do we?
Oh yeah, we don't own the backside, I don't.
Cause I know they mowed additionally for overflow parking, and I think they got permission from
That is school district on the
Water and
backside.
Light, yeah.
So I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, and I just wanted to ask because I drive by there and that corridor, you drive through there and you see compost. It's kind of like, and I know there's very few sites that, you know, have the ability to handle it, but I just wanted to ask the question.
I mean, we could take a look, I don't know if the piles would be so high that it wouldn't help or not, but, I mean, we could look at some point a fencing contract or a fencing project or something to put a you know, some type of screening or something along there.
It's never gonna completely go away, but, I would say in 2 years that pile will be significantly smaller. This will be the second year that we are working with a contractor out of Wausau to come and take our leaves. And just, so this will be the second year. So last year's pile is probably 40 to 60% smaller than the previous pile. So we're getting closer to having a smaller pile over there.
What do they do with them?
They sell strictly leaf mulch.
Oh.
Or leaf compost, I'm sorry. Or more organic based, I guess is the best way to say it.
The other thing is I noticed that we have, you know, I apologize for not being able to find it quick. It was a gatekeeper.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you know, we had talked in Public Works about the gatekeeper and, you know, that you gotta have these tags that you're supposed to have. My question is, you know, do we have the ability to look into like a card reader, a key fob type thing where residents can scan in and they can go dump their compost in a chucks or something, you know what I mean? Is there operators or something?
So since that Public Works meeting, I did look into it for about 2 hours or whatever.
Yep.
And I found a couple of different vendors, but I haven't done anything, had a chance to do anything more with that, so it is something that's.
Goes back into the tie-in with, if we're gonna pick up everybody's garbage, if they had a key fob and you were a taxpayer from the city of Wisconsin Rapids, you could go to the sanitary landfill and swipe your card to prove you have this key fob. It automatically, you know, tells Advanced Disposal that you're a resident, but also to our compost sites and some of the, you know, ward cleanups and stuff that we have tried in the past that are tough to manage. I'm just kind of curious to see if there's a direction that way that we can, how expensive it, just as an idea of like how expensive that would actually cost and be, and if it's worth doing and kind of explore. I just wanna bring that up.
Like I said, I did look into it about a couple hours, but I didn't get a solution from what I originally come to, so. But on the gatekeeper piece, because we have concerns about switching over to the automated garbage, we did increase the hours to cover the pit site a little bit more.
It's the west side, so that's the big concern, isn't it?
Yep. Because especially this year, we had a lot of problems during the daytime that the gatekeeper wasn't there, so.
Is there cameras out there?
Not yet, no.
Likely will be though.
Yeah, good.
So boxes been cut, stuff's been dumped.
Dumping or people taking?
Landfill objects ending up at our compost site.
I've noticed sometimes they don't bother to empty the garbage bags that they put the leaves in. Like, you know.
Yep.
It's rare, but the one lady out there on the west side I know has been really on top of it. She checked me like 3 times within an hour one day.
You're suspicious.
I'm
kind of scary with non-law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, I probably look like one, I guess.
Mr. Morley?
Just to, we were talking about grinding down or milling down a surface, what's the significance of the machine or the equipment?
So we would hire that done. We wouldn't do that work ourselves. We'd have a contractor come in and do that. So really it's project administration and then determining whether or not that type of project is an accessible project or if it's maintenance. Right now, the way the rules currently read, it would be an accessible project. And we really want to sit down and figure out if that's appropriate and see what the council thinks as well. But we need to determine the scope of what we want to do. Are we going to try to mill and fill the driving lane and then do some type of a slurry seal to seal the whole thing so we're not have to do the parking lanes necessarily? If the parking lane ride's rough, maybe who cares? But if that's an appropriate measure, those are some of the things that we still need to sort out in putting the program together and trying to figure out. I don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. I don't want to try to save a few bucks and then have a bunch of problems with joint sealing and
do the site filling or
something. Right. That's what I'm wondering is the mill. You're thinking is a 10-foot cut.
It could. I mean, it could be. It could be. Like you say, it could be a matter of you look at the whole street holistically. If there is a sewer and water lead that had settled, replace that 20 feet of curb and gutter that settled out, get the flow line back to what it needs to be, and then mill the whole, if it's a 32-foot road or 36-foot road, and then, look at all the sanitary manholes and everything like that, make sure, kind of along the same lines of the philosophy that I put on our seal coating plan now too, is identifying seal coating streets this year that we're going to do next year, and then make sure that all the maintenance activities in those areas are completed so you're not going back into areas, for 8-9 years unless something catastrophic happens.
Yeah, the only thing I think, and I think I've talked to Joe about it, is make sure the ability to stay flexible. It's nice to have the plans, it's nice to have the projects drawn up, but ultimately we don't know what next year's going to bring, we don't know what 2 years is going to bring. So having a 10-year plan out there doesn't make a lot of sense if we can't accomplish what needs to happen.
Well, and it's the same thing with our budget also. What we do is these are budget numbers based on averages, and every spring we go through and do an inspection, and it may say $60,000 in hot patches and $134,000 in chip sealing, but all of a sudden I may identify $80,000 worth of hot patches, and so we have to adjust things to be able to do what it is. It's a shot based on what we've done in the past and what we're seeing, and we adjust it based on what we need to do. So
what's your if we were to ask you what's your major issue or major thing that you want to see in the next foreseeable future, what do you think it would be?
We've had discussions, on taking care of the expressway. the integrity of the expressway as far as the infrastructure is there, but the ride quality is poor. You know, and we've done our partial depth patches and stuff like that has taken care of the joint failures. You know, but some of those are starting to fail, and so, you know, why are they failing? Is it because the material that was used isn't good enough or to withstand the salt, or is it actually failing outside of the repair or whatever? You know, so long term, you know, getting the expressway and 8th Street taken care of is what, you know, we're hoping to take care of. And also, you know, coming up with this mill and fill plan is high on our priority too.
And how's your building?
Huh?
And how's your building?
It's there.
So that's why we're doing a master plan.
Okay.
To evaluate it. We want to make some adjustments as far as, you know, we've got some park staff here. We've got some administrative staff over at the garage. We want to try to make those activities more efficient, where sometimes parks is real busy, sometimes streets is real busy, where, you know, they can work together as a team. That's going to require some remodeling. I mean, that may or may not make sense. And so, you know, part of the focus of this project that we're working on right now is to take a look at what's good, what isn't, given current design and building standards for municipal garages. Is there a rate of return on it as far as timing goes and longevity of equipment, that type of thing? So I'm very much looking forward to seeing the results of the study, and I think that'll help guide the city long-term in the future, trying to decide what are our long-range plans, and if it does involve making modifications, having that information now and taking a look at our bond schedule. And boy, if there's a big one that's just about done, is that the right time to look at doing something there? We know the West Side Fire Station too, you know, needs some help, and so as part of this project, we're looking at the possibilities of combining them into one facility and try to gain some efficiencies there. So, you know, I think there's a lot to be seen when that report's done, what the recommendations are.
Anyone else?
Just one note, Paul didn't mention it, but from my notes from our budget discussion was salt had a 10% increase this year. Mm-hmm. So just as you're thinking about where the cost drivers, you know, 10% in double-digit increase in material costs is substantial.
And with that, you know, last year or the second year? I think last year was the second. Either way, we replaced 2 of our 5-yard trucks with tandem axle trucks that have the salt brine system on the back of it, so we're pre-wetting our salt. So we have 50% of our fleet is capable of pre-wetting. You know, we talked about equipment replacement. Those other 2 trucks are on the plan to be replaced. You know, so everything would be pre-wet, and you're supposed to see across the board 30% reduction. You know, the other thing that we're looking at doing is the county currently, probably for the last 5 years, the state paid for their program, but it's hooked into hydraulics, and it's not to have Big Brother watching by any means or anything like that, but it's tied into the hydraulics and tied into the GPS so that you can see what the application rate is and where you've applied and stuff like that, so you don't have duplicated areas and stuff like that. So long-term plan, that would be great to have that also. You know, like I say, it would be after these other 2 trucks get put online, because it doesn't pay to retrofit a 10-year-old truck. So
we will know how winter will be shortly.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, if you
what is the farmer's almanac?
I don't know. It's gonna be bad.
If you pre-wet the salt, can we use less amount of salt?
Yeah,
what does it reduce it by?
30%.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's what there's been. University of Wisconsin, Michigan State, University of Michigan have done studies on it. Virtually, what's happening is you're pre-wetting it, everybody's followed a salt truck. You see the salt truck go down, everything is bouncing. So by pre-wetting it, you know, it's doing two things, because salt needs moisture to activate it. So it's starting the activation process, and then it's also creating it as a virtually a sponge mass or slop, you know, and so by that reduction, you're keeping it in the spot to do it, you know,
It's not leaving the roadway.
It's
not
not
going into
roll
the
off.
snowbank.
Makes it more dense so that it
Yeah.
doesn't springboard.
Correct. Yep.
How much is a new salt truck?
So the tandems that we bought, the tandems that we bought 2 years ago, we paid about $205,000 a piece for them. But we would not be buying tandems; we'd be buying single axles. So probably about 190, somewhere in there.
I'm just thinking if over time salt continues to go up.
Well, you're going to see also chloride pollution is becoming a bigger and bigger environmental issue. The Madison area is really, I mean, Lake Mendota is becoming saline. That's those lakes, the watershed's huge, and all of the runoff and everything ends up down there, and it's actually it never goes away, right? I mean, it's salt water, the water evaporates, salt doesn't. So there's starting to be some concerns about over application, alternatives, things like that. So we're gonna see some change in technology, and I think to some extent some change in expectations over the next decades, as far as you know, what reasonable winter driving conditions are going to look like, just based on pollution and issues. So
I guess I don't know if it's true, but I talked to a guy that was from Alaska, and he said he never had a truck that rusted until he came down here, because apparently they don't really salt up there at all. So
sand it. That there's Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I don't think they salt it. They sand like crazy. They must go through thousands of tons of sand. I don't think they salt the thing. Big city.
the road's probably a couple feet higher by the stop signs.
Yeah,
at the end of the winter.
their catch spacing cleaning program's got to be pretty robust, I'm sure. Because you got to pick it all up.
Wow, yeah.
Wow.
Huh. All right. All right. Thanks. Was that it for you two, Joey? Okay.
It's only a quarter to time.
Okay.
It's almost supper time.
Well, I think I would add one thing to the discussion since we're all here. You know, when we go to automated garbage collection, we've got some additional manpower resources at periods of time throughout the year. And so I think just being cognizant to the comments that were made tonight pertaining to maintenance and those types of activities, what are we doing with that labor resource that we didn't have before? So leave you with that sort of question or comment. I know staff are going to be considering what those demands and priorities are, and come forward with a proposal as we get through launching that service. But this is an opportunity to free up and reallocate resources to other services and other things that we do, and what those are obviously have to be defined. Surprised nobody asked the question. We asked it in recycling, but it wasn't.
That's because I'm not looking to reduce manpower.
Find a place where them to go, right? You already got it figured out where you're gonna put the 2 can holders.
Well, let's go to agenda item number 2, or correction 3. Set next meeting date. Do we want to meet?
Well, we got a Tuesday, because we have what? Wastewater.
Tuesday's gonna be tough for me. Well, can we start at maybe 4 Tuesday?
I'd prefer not to do Tuesday if we can.
Okay.
It's my son's birthday.
Oh. Well, I can do anytime.
Thursday?
What do you have one that works better day of the week?
I got a meeting Thursday already.
How's Wednesday for?
Wednesday, I think I'm out of town that night, yeah.
Well, I mean, Tuesday, we probably don't expect that one to be as short, right, or as long, I should say.
Are you gonna have one the following week?
We can do
30th, yeah.
Yeah, okay, how about October 30th?
That works for me.
Is 4 okay? 5, I guess at the latest. I'd rather start a little early.
October 30th is Thursday?
Tuesday.
Yeah, 2 weeks, or a week and a half from today, sorry.
Tuesday, on the 30th.
Yeah.
I'm on the regular schedule on the 6th.
That's right.
We still have one more night just for you.
4 is early. 5 would be better.
Alright, how about 5 on the
Yeah,
public?
earliest I can usually do is 4:30. Once I take off work.
So what do we wanna do, wastewater? We have wastewater, we have wastewater,
Oh, I mean, on the 30th?
yeah.
Yeah, we can probably do wastewater, then the other miscellaneous budgets, you might wanna look at them, and if you have questions, or,
I'd like to talk to Adam planning.
so we can have planning, and then the rest of them, you can, if you wanna just accumulate questions, or if you want, just kinda look over the rest of them, and kinda let me know who maybe you want there, or if you wanna.
Or CCA maybe.
There's stuff like that, so.
You say 5 o'clock on the 30th?
October 30th, yes.
2 weeks.
October 30th?
There's 5 Tuesdays in October.
Yes, so you did get an extra one.
Fuck yes.
Cause it'd be nice, yeah, if we could finish up that Tuesday.
Wouldn't that be awesome to have 5 Tuesdays
Cause
in every month?
we have to drop.
What would you
So we could have 5 meetings.
Cause we have to adopt November, right? So it's November.
The public hearing will be on November 20th. So I will be publishing a budget in the paper probably that last week of October, because we have to do a notice of the public hearing 15 days in advance, but that doesn't necessitate, and then there's usually an estimate of what the budget is at that time, but we're not held to that. It's just
Summary budget.
Yeah.
I think I get home at that time, so it's not a meeting, so.
Yeah, so 30th.
Cold called me,
We'll have this public
pulling
hearing
in here,
on
I'm like,
the
can't
20th.
she come in?
30th, yeah, it would be good to kind of wrap her up or at least get through.
And then we can always, then we have the regularly scheduled 6th.
Oh, yeah.
November 6th, so, and then you could actually have another one then following Tuesday, so there's an opportunity to have.
So about,
meeting on the budget if you so wish, or.
is it easier to have a meeting, I mean, the 6th is election day, right?
Right.
November 6th, so is that gonna cause any issues? No? Okay.
Gotta go vote, that don't take too long.
Vote before the meeting, I guess, just in case
Yeah.
we go past 8.
Tomorrow
Good
morning.
idea.
So 30th at 5.
Alright, agenda item number 4 is adjourned.
I'll make motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion second to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we are adjourned.
Lead.